So, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Call the roll call, please.
Dr. Bell. Commissioner Hunter Shane.
Here.
Commissioner Elizabeth Pepper. Here. Vice Chair Charles Martinson.
Here.
Carol Bode.
Here.
Uniform.
Thank you. The agenda is posted 72 hours prior to each meeting in the following places: the City Hall, Pearl Public Library, and in the Stoneman Building on Pascalito Drive. In addition, it is posted on the city's website. We welcome public input during meetings of commissions and city meetings. At this time, public is invited to address the Public Safety Commission on items that are not the agenda. Pursuant to state law, the Public Safety Commission may not discuss or take action on issues that are raised during this meeting by the public. To ensure that everyone has time to be able to be heard, we would ask that those of you who are present and wish to make a comment come up to the lectern and the microphone and identify yourself and speak clearly so that we'll be able to take notes of whatever issue it is you raise. Do we have anyone in the audience here present that wishes to make a comment at this point regarding something not on the agenda? No one. Is there anyone that's joined us remotely that we're able to identify?
We have no comment.
Thank you. Do we have any this is a point at which commissioners may wish to report on meetings or conferences they have attended. Are there any reports? None. This brings us to item 1 under new business. I'd like to open with a comment. In 2019, the City Council authorized Iteris to conduct a citywide traffic circulation study to serve as foundational data and analysis. It can be used in the design of future capacity enhancements and traffic calming measures. Purpose: Harris report give us grounding. Their initial report was received in 2021, and the council requested additional information. Tonight, Iteris, a representative from Iteris, is here to present an updated study. Public Safety Commission is tasked with receiving and reviewing the study and forwarding it to the council with comments, recommendations. To assist in that assignment, the commission appointed a traffic task force made up of citizens and staff. They will study the report and provide input and recommendations to this commission, which in turn will provide input and recommendations to the city council at a future date. For the benefit of those of you in the audience who may not know these people, members of the task force are Justin Levy, Ryan Liu, Chris Mailing, Oli Roswell, and Jason Romani. Apologize for butchering first name. City staff members include Police Chief John Encontro, Public Works Director Amber Shaw, Motor Officer Leroy Abington. Brittany Camacho is our administrator. San Marino Unified School District is represented by Michael Lynn, Chief Business Officer. And I serve as the chair of the task force. Once the Iteris representative has presented the report this evening, members of the task force will be invited to ask questions, followed by members of the public, and then finally the commissioners. Please remember, our purpose tonight is to inform ourselves, to gather information, to have an opportunity to understand the information in the report. We can ask questions. We should inquire, and we should try to leave the meeting this evening with as clear an understanding of the information that has been given to us to serve as the basis for future analysis and design. As a part of the report, Iteris has presented some recommendations. Those recommendations will be analyzed and we'll have an opportunity to discuss the appropriateness of them at a future time. However, members of the audience are encouraged, should they be interested in doing so, to ask questions of Iteris about things such as how did they arrive at that? What data did they rely on? What other considerations did they consider? But if you would focus on gathering information tonight, that will help us all do our job when we get back together once the task force has completed its analysis. Director Shaw, would you like to introduce the representative from Iteris and take the...
Yes, thank you, Chair Bogan. Good evening, commissioners. I echo Chair Bogan inviting the public to share information, ask questions of our consultant that is here this evening's presentation about the staff report. I echo that everything in the report is open to discussion, that we're here for the community's input. I've only been with the city a month, but I am excited and interested about learning about everything that is important to the community, and nothing that's in the report is written in stone. There's recommendations, and there are things that we will evaluate as a community, as a city, to determine what is the best fit and vision of the city. So just because it's in here doesn't mean that we're going to go out and build it tomorrow. So I don't want anyone to feel that way. That being said, I do welcome our representative from Iteris, Deepak Kaushik, up to the podium, and we'll give him a presentation from this point forward.
Amber. All right, thank you. As Chair Bogue mentioned, or as Amber mentioned, I'm Deepak Kaushik with Iteris. We're the firm that completed the traffic circulation study up to this point. As Chair Bogue mentioned, we started the study in 2019, in fall 2019. Came to this commission in I think it was February 2020 to present the existing conditions. It was an interim step of this report back then. Looking at just where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. He summarized it, but I'll summarize it again here. Is that we had this initial draft of the report prepared in March 2021, presented at the Public Safety Commission April 2021. That was a virtual meeting. It went to City Council. There was some requests for additional info, additional parts to be added, and there was also a request to refine the public outreach. So we actually did a public outreach town hall That was a virtual meeting. December 2021, and the city prepared a survey questionnaire to go along with that in March, April 2022. That was completed by several members of the public. So all of that helped inform where we are today with this revised report, which we prepared in November last year, and is now for discussion and comment. That's where we are today in green. And of course, the goal is to get comments, make edits as needed, hear what people have to say, create a revised report that then gets moved forward to city council and eventually finalized. So Chair also summarized pretty well what kind of a traffic study is and where we're going here, but I'll also say, kind of what it is and what it isn't from an industry standpoint. Now, what it is where we took data, we reviewed current data, future forecasting of traffic data, gathered public input, identified deficiencies and gaps in circulation, eventually safety, and the goal is to make recommendations from that can support the decision-making of the city, give a document that the city can use to determine what improvements or recommendations they want to move forward with or not. So that's what it is. What it isn't, it's not necessarily, it's a citywide study, but it's not like we're gathering data necessarily at every street or every intersection in the city. The defined study area, which we'll show, that's in the report. We want to hear about everything. That's kind of where the public outreach comes from. Every street, every issue that's on any street, but the data itself was not meant to be a comprehensive, take account at every single street, every single intersection in the city. And it's not the only planning document. This is just kind of thinking larger as terms of agencies when they do circulation studies. It's not the only planning document that a lot of agencies rely on. Others include LRSP, which is a local road safety plan, or the city circulation element that goes along with the general plan that gets updated, every 10 to 15 years or so. And then ATP stands for Active Transportation Plan. So there's different plans that different cities engage in terms of identifying improvements where it comes to traffic, safety, active transportation, all of that. So as mentioned, we had provided a draft report and taken it to council in 2021. There were some questions and some recommendations for additions to the report. And so just at a high level, these are some of the things that are new to the report from the last version. If people are familiar, we added a future year traffic analysis scenario, where we previously used only existing traffic analysis. So we forecasted you a future year and presented the level of service at the intersection for a future year, provided a more in-depth review of collision history, collision hotspots. I'll get into that. I mentioned further discussion on public outreach, what we've heard based on the town hall and the survey questionnaire. The recommendations that we had created a prioritization process where recommendations can be ranked based on how they best meet certain goals. That prioritization process is up for discussion, but it's in the report. It's a scoring system that allows for the city to rank recommendations. And lastly, we had a traffic calming toolbox that was in the previous report. One thing we added to that though was a method, also a scoring kind of ranking system for how the city can take traffic calming type requests, because that's actually a lot of the type of requests that came out of that survey, where a stop sign here or there's a speed issue here. They want the city to look at it, how the city can take those requests and evaluate them in sort of a numerical way and score them. So that's also in the report. So our traffic analysis study area is shown here with these dots. There were 30 intersections that we studied. They were split half and half between signalized intersections, unsignalized intersections, and this is where we collected data. The reason we're looking at intersections and we're looking at the whole city, but the reason we focus on intersections for data is because intersections are the choke point of a circulation network. It's where right of way is there's a line for it. There's a demand for it. One side going one way, the other side's going another way, as opposed to a straight segment of the street where there is no delay for movement of vehicles. The delay comes at intersections. So intersection of the choke points, that's why typically traffic studies evaluate the operations at intersections. So the data that, as I mentioned, we collected started at the outset of this project, which is in fall of 2019. So that's pre-pandemic data. At the 30 intersections, we collected AM and PM peak period vehicle counts at the intersections on a typical weekday. So that was in fall, schools were in session, no holidays. And along with the vehicle counts, we also collected pedestrian counts and bicycle counts at the crosswalks there. That data is in the report. So we use that data most specifically for identifying, evaluating levels of service at the intersection. So level of service is a measure that's used in the traffic analysis world to really provide a letter grade of how well an intersection is operating in terms of average vehicle delay, the delay experienced by a vehicle. And it's a letter grade system that goes from A to F, like a report card would, where A is the least amount of congestion and F represents the highest amount of congestion. So in the report, you'll see that there's tables that describe the level of service. And this graphic here shows specifically the AM peak hour level of service, just a dot via color code at the study intersections that I mentioned, the 30 intersections. So green on this map means level of service A through C. A lighter shade of yellow is LOSD, which gets a little bit worse in terms of congestion. And then there's a few LOSEs and a couple LOSFs where the dot is red. And you can see a little bit of a trend that the LOSEs and Fs are generally located along San Marino and Sierra Madre Boulevard. Now, some of this is also because there's a different grading system for signalized intersections versus unsignalized intersections. So, for example, at Sierra Madre Boulevard and Lombardi, and Sierra Madre Boulevard and Road, the letter grades colors red. Those are the actual levels of service of the intersection with delay, but it's the delay experienced by the side streets, not the delay experienced by Sierra Madre Boulevard. Because as you know, Sierra Madre Boulevard it's free flowing. There is no delay for those vehicles. So there's a little bit of a different scale between signalized and unsignalized. Similar map here showing the levels of service in the PM peak hour. And the PM peak hour, the afternoon compared to the morning, did have a few more intersections where the traffic volumes show that the levels of service were a little bit worse. There are a couple more E's and F's in the PM peak hour than they are in the AM peak hour. And that data is all. We also looked at collision history using the SWITRS, and that's SWITRS stands for the Statewide Integrated Record Management System, traffic system that the state PHP compiles collision data and collision history at intersections and roadways within the city. So it's a kind of a jumbly map here, but the bigger the dot, the more incidents, collisions there are at a certain location. So this map generally follows, this map is in the report with the data, but it generally follows the trend that the higher amount of volumes that you have on the street, Huntington Drive and Marino, Sierra Madre Boulevard, the more collisions you're going to see. And this generally from what we talked with PD is what they would expect to see. But there are some areas that jump out at you, and maybe San Marino, Lorraine had a few more incidents to the west of San Marino in the vicinity of Bedford. There's a big dot there. So there's a lot of data here. There's a lot of historical incidents. This is a 10-year set of data. So there's all kinds of traffic incidents, some of them types of accidents, broadside, side swipes. It's all there. So there's a lot of spread out data, but generally it follows the locations where those highest traffic volumes. As I mentioned, there was public outreach done after the city council meeting. Specifically, there was a town hall meeting in December and the survey questionnaire. So there was a lot of good info there. Hard to summarize it in one succinct slide here, but in general, what we heard most was that interventions and countermeasures that were most favorable were of the signage variety and less of large scale physical changes, signage, high visibility crosswalks, speed humps, those came up a lot in the questionnaire. The words that you see on the right there represent the bigger the word, or the info bubble here, or the bigger the word, more often that street came up in the survey questionnaire. So no surprise, streets like Huntington and Los Robles and San Marino came up quite a bit. But then of course, as you can see, there's a lot of local residential streets that came up in the questionnaire, and a lot of those requests, whether they were speed related or stop sign requests that came at a lot of these streets, those type of improvements, those type of recommendations really fall into traffic calming toolbox and the way the city is going to handle traffic calming requests moving forward. And so I'll talk about that, but it was good to hear that there was a lot of insight from residents on their particular street or maybe a larger street. So now talking about the recommendations. So the recommendations specifically spot specific location recommendations that are in the report. There's 5 of them at intersections. I'll go through each one of them, but as you can see on the map here, they sort of spread out across the city. There's Los Robles Mission, downtown area. On the north, there's Sierra Madre Boulevard and Robles. On the west of San Marino, there's the Bedford Huntington intersection. There's San Marino Huntington Drive right here in front of City Hall, and then San Marino Lorraine. So it's a mix of just like our study here, it's a mix of unsignalized intersection and signalized intersections with potential recommendation. And these recommendations, we're trying to strike a balance between recommendations that are pedestrian, possibly and safety related, to also traffic circulation delay reducing related. So those two wants are sometimes in conflict with each other, making a recommendation that is more beneficial for the driver, for the vehicle, doesn't always help the pedestrian and vice versa. So there are trade-offs with certain types of improvement. The 5 improvements that I show on the map here, I'm just listing here. First one, Bedford and Huntington, the recommendation is a new pedestrian crosswalk with a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. That's shown on this picture to the right here. That's actually an example at Kenilworth, which is just east of City Hall here. So it's a design essentially that's in place right now, just east of City Hall. This would be at the intersection to the west, and that's a beacon. If you're not familiar with it, it's not a signal. It's a flashing beacon that the pedestrian, if they want to cross, walk up and push it just like a regular push button, and it flashes for the driver to stop. At San Marino Huntington right here, the initial recommendation was to extend the curbs to reduce the crossing time and distance across Huntington Drive, sorry. We further refined that based on information from the public and the town hall discussion to recommend a restripe of the southbound approach to that intersection to reduce 2 through lanes down to 1 through lane. So that's the southbound approach here along Sierra Madre, which turns into San Marino, because that second lane essentially just merges right away when you get past City Hall. You get south of City Hall, right where there's on-street parking. That second lane merges very quickly. So the recommendation is to reduce the number of through lanes at the city. I'll show you the design. At San Marino Lorraine, further south here from City Hall, recommendation, the traffic signal. This came up quite a bit in the public's, there's back and forth on the popularity of this one, but it's still in there, and there's fairly high delay based on the report that we did at this intersection, vehicle delay with stop controlled intersection as it is right now. Putting in a traffic signal would help reduce that delay. Then at Los Robles Mission in the downtown area, we mentioned that's a signalized intersection where the recommendation there is to extend the curbs at the skewed angle of that intersection to reduce the crossing distance for a pedestrian. And at Sierra Madre Boulevard and Robles to the north of where we are here, similarly to Bedford Huntington, the recommendation is a pedestrian crosswalk with a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, not a signal, but a beacon to allow for crossing. So here's the Bedford Huntington intersection. This is a conceptual design plan. It's just conceptual, done by our sub-consultant on the project. Shows the example here. Huntington Drive is the east-west street, and the crossing would be the curb extension on the south end. This is where retail area ends, the west end of the retail area on the south side, to allow for a new crosswalk across Huntington, essentially just like you do today, is you're crossing two phases. Because at San Marino and Huntington, give me this map. This map is skewed, so the north is actually to your left here if you're looking at it. But as I mentioned, the recommendation is to reduce the southbound, so that's the direction going. Looks like east here, the San Marino, Air Module Boulevard. Reduce it down from 2 through lanes to 1 through lane. Maintain the 1 left turn lane and the 1 right turn lane. Reduce the number of through lanes from 2 to 1, because that second through lane gets through the intersection but has to merge immediately anyway. This also, and it was brought up, and it's a very good point I did in the public outreach, is that this has a metering effect at the Lorraine intersection. Less vehicles southbound direction would get through on any given cycle phase. That would then result in less vehicles ending up at the Lorraine intersection, where we saw quite a bit of delay and recommended the traffic signal. So this one actually kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with San Marino and Lorraine. And here's the San Marino Lorraine design. The intersection is a stop controlled intersection in all directions. The recommendation is the traffic signal with curb extensions as shown here. The curb extensions don't necessarily have to be in there. We did them for the sake of the design. We heard some people, they weren't as popular. I heard from some people that the signal itself wasn't as popular. And so that actually comes into play in our prioritization process that we'll talk about in a second. That's San Marino Lorraine, Los Robles Mission in downtown. Fairly simple design here of curb extensions where the intersection is at a skew, which makes the west leg of this intersection crossing quite a bit longer than the other legs of the intersection. So by extending the curb, it would allow for a pedestrian to cross at a shorter distance and reduce the time that vehicles have to wait for someone to cross the signal there. So it's a little bit of a win-win in terms of vehicle circulation and pedestrian circulation. As I mentioned, what we added to the report, this is in the table, is a prioritization methodology for how to prioritize these 5 improvements, rank them in terms of how they meet goals. The goals used in this case were how they best meet safety. Do they have public support? What level of public support do they have? Their construction costs, that just taking costs at a high level, planning level standpoint, how much these improvements cost. And sometimes, which, like I said, is a trade-off between safety and pedestrian circulation, is vehicle circulation. How well do they reduce delay or improve vehicle circulation? So there's a lot of numbers here in this table, but essentially the 4 goals were given a weight number. So on the first column to the right of the goal is a weight for each goal. And then each improvement, each recommendation across the columns there was given a score and how they best meet that goal. And then the numbers were tallied up. So that score was then multiplied by the weight of a particular goal. And the numbers were tallied up to rank the improvements, the recommendations that had the highest score and the lowest score. So the highest score from this prioritization method, from highest to lowest, as shown here, were San Marino, Huntington, then Los Robles Mission with the curb extensions, Sierra Madre Robles, which is the flashing beacon recommendation, Bedford Huntington, also the flashing beacon recommendation, and San Marino Lorraine traffic signal, which came in last of the 5 ranking. So those were the spot-specific recommendations that came out of our study. Another set of recommendations were what we're calling quick fix measures, which are not necessarily recommended at this point at any particular location, but could become citywide standard improvements. And they're listed in the report. I listed a couple of them here. Or if not improvements, then policies that to be implemented. One of the improvements is implementing all red phasing and timing at all signalized intersections. So that would mean where, if you're not familiar with all red, what that means is when one signal phase in one direction, let's say the east-west direction, goes from yellow to red, before the next phase, north-south can start, there's a time in between where everybody is stopped. So that is not necessarily the case at all intersections. So implementing 2 seconds, 3 seconds, potentially all red phasing, depending on the width of the intersection. The bigger the intersection, the more clearance time is needed for those last cars to get in on red. You would need more all red time. So that's one of quick fix ideas. The other one was adding backplates to the signals, Caltrans style yellow reflective backplates. These are better for visibility. These also can come in handy in the rare emergency incident where power goes out and it's nighttime. It's easier to see a down signal, having those yellow backplates. And then this kind of ties with the traffic calming toolbox, but stop sign warrant criteria adoption for how the city can handle requests for new stop signs and how to take that request and have a methodology that uses volumes, average vehicle delay, and have it be consistent with the MUTCD, which is the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Design. So those are some quick fix ideas, not necessarily at any particular locations, just tools in the toolbox. And then lastly here, talk about the traffic calming toolbox. So this is a part of our scope of work was to come up with a toolbox of ideas that could be used for neighborhood traffic calming. So not implementing these necessarily on some of the major streets, but in streets that people live on, the local streets, or maybe collectors, which is usually one level up from local, a toolbox of potential improvements that a couple are shown here. Speed hump is shown on the figure to the bottom there. Curb extension, as we've talked about before, shown up here on the top, coupled with the crosswalk. Traffic calming toolbox would follow the 3 E's. This is just the industry kind of mantra of education, which is informing the residents on how they can participate in traffic calming and submit requests. And of course, enforcement is important for the PD forces the recommendations and make sure that people are adhering to the traffic calming ideas that have been implemented, and using engineering best practices to develop the appropriate strategies at the appropriate location. Because really it's a toolbox of ideas. One particular street, it could have multiple interventions that make sense. And so using engineering best practices for city staff is important. So then lastly, this is the flow chart of how the city would take traffic calming. There's a lot here, and this is in the report, but it's just kind of a flow chart of how the city would take traffic calming requests, decide whether to take action on it right away, if it results in an immediate hazard, for example, or whether to do additional data collection. So this was in our report previously, this flow chart, but what we added was a process that once you get to the step 3, the step 3 here is to evaluate further using data, collecting new data. It's a process here that the city can use based on, again, a scoring method of a particular street or a particular intersection, evaluating the speed, collecting speed data, collecting volume on that street, and depending on where the speed, average and average daily traffic falls in a range, it would be assigned a point value. City would then work with the police department to gather accident history along that street, traffic violation history. Depending on the levels of that data, they would be also scored a certain set of points. And then there'd be some level of point value for public works discretion to determine, if measure is reasonable for a certain area. It could be a recommendation to put a stop sign in at one intersection, and it might make sense data-wise, but if you just put a stop sign in at the intersection just west of that, it might not make sense. So there's some level of discretion, some common sense that has to come into some of this. It's not all just numbers. So then just summarizing the report here, we really had three types of recommendations that came out of this report. Location-specific recommendations that had the conceptual designs that we showed at the 5 locations. There were also quick fix global measures citywide that would be more of a menu option for the city to decide on how best to use those and implement those potentially citywide or implement policies. And the last was traffic calming toolbox measures, also a menu of measures based on different types of traffic calming that would be implemented or evaluated as requested by the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you'll stay with us. We would like to do at this point is invite questions to help us all better understand the report and recommendations that were made. As I indicated earlier, we've appointed a traffic task force to study this report, detailed report, to allow us to report to the city council. I'd like to invite any members of the task force present either physically or online to ask questions first, and then we'll invite them. Could you step up and introduce yourself so people will get a chance? Who's on the commission or on the task force? No, I just say that.
Hi, I'm Chris
In the
Nally,
corners.
and I'm a resident of San Bernardino, 15 years. And I've got about 5 questions for you. First one's going to be a layup, then we'll get into some great ones. So in your report, you highlighted intersections such as Rain in St. Albans, Rain in Virginia, Rain in San Marino Avenue, are left out West Drive, which is considered a major thoroughfare going north south, especially with Huntington. I was curious why that wasn't addressed.
That was not right, that was not one of the sections. Study area was determined in coordination with city staff at the time, the city public works director at the time, project manager. We had, just to be honest, we had a scope of work that had a budget for X amount of intersections, and X amount of data collection, and so we were limited to 30 locations. Those were 30 locations.
Next question, regarding the proposed curb extensions at San Marino Avenue and Huntington Drive, how will the bus stop area on the northwest and southeast corners affect?
The bus stop area would be affected. Possibly should be. There will be. Based on design, this one particularly right here. Location.
Lane on the north.
Southbound? No. But the recommendation is to remove the food lane. Keep the right turn lane. So you actually have some extra pavement that would be potentially chevron down.
You consider the installation of a signal at Sierra Madre Boulevard.
No, because the traffic volume in the east and west direction is not high enough. That's probably generally the reason for that. We can take another look at it. Of course, all these questions, we can take another look at. And work. Open to collecting additional data. If we did this.
In your opinion, would the installation of curb extensions at Lorraine, San Marino Avenue, cause more backups by eliminating right turns, especially southbound?
Yeah, eliminating the right turn movement there, but today there's not. There's no straight right turn lane, but there's wide enough. So, now that coupled with, of course, the signal may may alleviate that too. You're looking at that. But we can look into that. I mean, the curb extension by itself, sure, would add more backup. This was curb extension coupled with the traffic signal. So the traffic signal will help reduce the delay. Yes, curb extension, in theory would reduce the ability for vehicles to sneak by and in a dedicated right turn lane. But if they don't have to stop, if they're all going through at the same time in that particular direction, then you get a signal. And, it's possible that it may be minimal. Okay, but we can.
Did you consider the addition of a stop sign on San Marino Avenue, north and southbound, at either Melville or Adair? Slow the speed of traffic.
Traffic on San Marino?
Yeah.
Well, so we didn't recommend any stop sign as part of this report in terms of spot specific recommendations. As we were instructed, or as we went through this project, stop signs were to fall within sort of the traffic calming toolbox that we had decided on. Now, of course, we didn't recommend any specific locations for that toolbox. There's a menu of options, but no, that was not considered. And that would now fall under the stop warrant criteria that the city is planning to implement possibly with this quick fix type. So that would be a stop sign request that would then be evaluated using this formula, this method based on the MUTC.
Thank you. Are there other members of the task force that have questions? Anyone online?
Don't show any raised hands.
Would you like him to join us or to ask his question?
Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, you can hear me. Okay. The traffic calming measure toolbox presents 24 measures. Only 6 out of the 24, that's 25%, have any mention of cost. 3 of these 6 are obviously low cost, like signs, turn restrictions, or road sensors. If the prioritization table gives cost a weight of 4 higher than the vehicle circulation with a weight of 3, why does the ITERIS toolbox omit the cost of 3/4 of the tools? We need an explanation regarding the prioritization table, how ITERIS determined cost scores for the 5 proposed projects. They don't make sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, the cost, so we're kind of talking about 2 different things here. One is the 5 spot specific, location specific recommendations, improvements that came out of, like I said, in the first part of the report. We came up with planning level cost estimates for those. Those went into our prioritization, not the traffic calming toolbox measures. As you can see in the ranking criteria for the toolbox measures, cost was not a factor to whether to do it or to not do it. There was speed of the roadway, volume, police data in terms of incidents and collisions. Cost was not part of that evaluation. Cost was only part of the prioritization, how we prioritize the 5 spot specific recommendations in the study, which are the curb extensions and the block crosswalks. But maybe confused.
May I, as a follow-up What I think you're saying is that in order to determine cost, you have to have a specific situation.
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, it's much easier to now, if we want to add, yeah, cost to a speed bump signage, we can add that to the report. But yes, for something like curb extensions, for something like a traffic signal, knowing how large that signal is, or know those things, it's spot specific, it is much easier to assign a cost.
Hi, good evening. Can everyone hear me? Good evening, commissioners and staff. I am Ryan, a member of the Traffic Safety Task Force. I'm also a registered engineer in the state of California. I got 4 questions. My first question is, in figure 4 of the circulation study, the largest collision hotspot appears to be Huntington and Bedford. I would like to ask, do we know what types of collisions are happening at this intersection? And does the recommended treatment at this location, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, or RRFB, address these types of collisions? If the RFB doesn't address the type of collisions that are happening at Huntington and Bedford, what other types of countermeasures could be proposed at this intersection to address safety?
Yeah, all right. The data, we did comb through the data of that particular intersection. The majority of them are broadside accidents. It's quite varied, but the majority of them were broadside accidents there. It's not, I wouldn't say that it necessarily addresses or does not address the incidence of broadside accidents at this intersection. So it's an unsignalized intersection. This is, let's say, a westbound Huntington Drive left turning vehicle hitting an eastbound traveling Huntington Drive. I'm sorry, yeah. A westbound left turn from Huntington going down Bedford, hitting a eastbound direction Huntington Drive vehicle, so a broadside like that. Adding a crosswalk, it wouldn't necessarily, I can't say the data is going to show that necessarily addresses that improvement, but we can look at countermeasures to address that improvement, to address the collision data there.
Okay, my second question is, it looks like rectangular RFBs are proposed at 2 locations along Huntington Drive and Sierra Madre. Both of these streets have speed limits of 35 to 40 miles per hour. The FHWA's guide for improving pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossing locations do not recommend this type of treatment along roadways with more than 15,000 vehicles a day, speed limits of 35 miles per hour up, and multiple lanes in each direction. Were there other types of crosswalks or countermeasures considered at these locations, and why weren't they not recommended?
Yes and no. The RRFB was mostly recommended because it is, so you're correct. It's also, it's a measure that the city is familiar with. Like I said, it's at the Kenilworth intersection to the east is this same type of rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So there's a bit of a familiarity there in the design. You're correct that it is, depending on the speed of the roadway, the volume of the roadway, that you could look for a different measure, like there's a Hawk signal, which is there's a mast arm and a signal above. It's not a signal, but it's also a warning to vehicles with a lighting above the street. It's a unique street, though, in the sense of it's not like somebody is crossing 6 lanes at once. There's a median in between, so it's 2 separate 3-lane crossings as opposed to 1 6-lane crossing. So it's a little bit of a unique location. We felt that the measure that's already in place at Kenilworth to the east was appropriate for the location here.
So my third question is about the outreach survey. It looks like approximately 100 residents responded to that survey questionnaire. Were these unique responses or individual residents? In either case, is the response rate relative to the city's size significant enough to come to the conclusion stated on page 23 regarding who's in favor and who's not in favor? Would these conclusions and opinions based on these 100 responses be considered representative of the community?
I would say so. That there's no hard and fast rule. Yes, I believe it was 100-ish unique responses. Whether it's representative on a per capita basis, I don't know the exact answer to that in terms of the 100, quite a bit for a population of X in the city. But it was quite a few more people. I mean, if you have a typical public outreach meeting, whether it's pre-COVID or even during virtual, you rarely get 100 people there. I mean, sometimes you do. The town hall meeting, I think we might have had 25 to 30 people online for that. So personally, I was pleasantly surprised to get that many responses to the survey. I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to whether 100 is the quorum is enough to say it's representative. I think public outreach is a great thing. It's a great tool, but the people that show up are the people that care the most, and that's a lot of times that's a subset of the population. So I can't answer if it's actually representative and whatnot, but I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of responses we got.
Okay, my last question or sort of comment on the report is looking at table 1 and figure 1 show that study intersection number 30 is San Gabriel in California. Figure 2 shows the lane configurations for that intersection, and Appendix B shows the traffic counts that are conducive to the patterns that we would typically expect at an intersection like San Gabriel in California. The LOS and delay that's reported in tables 3 and 4 are based on the Synchro LOS calculation sheets in Appendix C, but in Appendix C for that intersection number 30, it's showing the lane configurations for San Gabriel and Huntington. We're seeing 4 eastbound and westbound lanes. Was the intent to study San Gabriel in California or San Gabriel and Huntington? Furthermore, the signal phasings for that intersection show all permissive unprotected left turns that aren't present at either intersection, since San Gabriel and Huntington has left turn arrows and San Gabriel and California has left turn arrows as well. And sort of at the end of it, the LOS analysis says you use the Synchro 11 software, which does support the HCM 6th edition methodology that was released in 2016. Was there a reason why this analysis didn't use that methodology? It looks like some of the signalized intersections use HCM 2010, but in the appendix, it looks like they were all analyzed with HCM 2000.
A lot there. Yeah, if there's a we can definitely take a look at the results there. If there was an error in the lane configurations, like you're saying, in our analysis, we'll double check it and correct it. I can't answer what it actually says in the report. I don't have the report literally right in front of me. The methodology, and we started this, of course, in 2019. So I have to think back as to the use of the methodology. But the methodology of Highway Capacity Manual, it's a program that is used to evaluate level of service at intersections. It's over the years been modified or edited for different years. There's the HCM 2000 method. There's a 6th. There's a 10th edition. So we can look back as to why the 2000 methodology was used. There are times when you use this software that if you get intersections that are a little that have different phasing, that one method is not supported. But you're right, there are workarounds to that. So we can look through that, and if there's a more refined method to use, we can use that.
Thanks for answering my questions. That's all I got.
Sure.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public who wish to ask questions to do so. Guessing that there might be more than one person. We do have some requests. Why don't we do it this way? Why don't you call the name of, based on the request form. If the person called would come up to the dais and speak into the microphone so we can capture their question. And just go ahead and please make her.
Neil Pedersen.
Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here and to see the committee members. Thank you very much. Actually, having our police chief here, our fire chief here, and city manager. Wow, great. Thank you very much. I have before me the traffic circulation study we're talking about here. And right now I'm on page 17. Page 17. I'm going to come back to it in about 5 or 10 seconds, but just wanted to follow that. The last 2 or 3 days, I've spent a great deal of time walking through the neighborhood, talking to a lot of the citizens on Rain Road. There's a lot of people by telephone, a lot of people by email. The consensus is among all the people I talk to is threat of having more traffic on Lorraine Road. We already have a great deal of traffic on Lorraine. We don't need any more. Already when the rush hour is around, a lot of the people toward the intersection of Lorraine and San Marino Avenue, the public getting in and out of their driveways. So just going to be a worse than with more traffic. So I went to page 17 because I was trying to find out a reason, more specific reason as to why, other than just thinking there's going to be more traffic on Lorraine, why would there be? I'm trying to find some facts. In fact, that's what I found on page 17. The very first sentence on page 17, I quote, "As expected, significant signalized intersections carry higher volumes than two-way or all-way stop and control intersections," unquote. And so that is the proof that I was kind of looking for right out of our own consultant's paper. So I think that that's very important, and I would encourage the committee to please do not think about putting a traffic intersection at San Marino and Lorraine Road. It's going to cause more traffic. We already have enough. So please, I would ask you not to do that. Thank you very much.
Malador. Ask questions or read our comments?
It would be preferable if you ask questions that help us all learn.
I have both. I ask a couple of questions and then just read. That.
Or-
Thank you.
Right?
Sure, yes.
Tell
So-
me so he can-
Yeah, my name is Susan Alidor. I live on Lorraine Road, so my questions are focused on Lorraine. When I look up the city website, there was an earlier study of that intersection, San Marino and Lorraine Road, that recommended a reduction on San Marino from 30 to 25. Now the recommendation is a traffic signal, so I wanted to understand how we evolved from just reducing speed to a traffic signal, which would increase this when people are going through traffic lights. They're unimpeded, they can go 30 miles an hour, maybe go a little faster when there's a yellow light. So it's increasing speed by adding traffic signals. So how did we go from the prior report of reducing speed to this report?
Totally familiar with that prior report that reduced speed. This was a recommendation to improve vehicle circulation. My guys said, keep saying that there are trade-offs when it comes to the recommendations and improvements. The recommendation to reduce vehicle delay at this intersection, which came out of our analysis of the volumes at this intersection, that there's, by the fact that it's a stop controlled intersection in all directions, there's high vehicle delay, high even for a stop control type intersection. So like I said, stop controlled intersections generally have higher vehicle delays. This one had, I believe, the highest of the bunch in the city. So that's really the reasoning for that recommendation is from a vehicle circulation delay.
My second question does relate to the use of the level of service analysis, but I certainly agree with you. It's way at odds. So thank you, Public Safety Commission, for the work you do. I just wanted to provide a really quick comment. I'm Susan Aldor, and I'm opposed to a traffic signal at the San Marino Moraine Road corner. I live on Moraine Road, and regularly walk across that exact intersection every day. Twice a day with my dog Teddy. I take comfort that there's a 4-way stop sign because I know every car is going to halt. The traffic signal would allow cars to zoom through the intersection without stopping on green, perhaps even picking up on yellow. That would create an unsafe danger for pedestrians, bikers, and resident cars that are leaving their driveway. I read the full report provided by Interis today. We have a few comments about it that work towards opposing this traffic signal. Section 1 of the report says this is a study about to implement safety and traffic calming improvements. Safety and traffic calming. However, if you read the reasons Interis provides for a traffic signal, they do not involve safety. Rather, they provide that they want to reduce congestion and move traffic faster on that corner during morning and afternoon rush hours. So the stated objective is to move more traffic at a quicker rate for about an hour in the morning and the hour in the afternoon to prevent pedestrians, bike riders, and residents as they try and take the driveway. And I'll also note that the report says it's only a worst case scenario, so the morning rush hour and the afternoon rush hour. So you don't look at weekends, you don't look at a day like today where people are off. But the other 22 hours a day when there isn't a delay on intersection. I don't know how that factors into your level of service analysis, but there are 24 hours a day, not just. The city paid for a study that Interis uses this level of service analysis that doesn't evaluate safety, it just evaluates delays in this worst case scenario. And so they concluded that a traffic signal is better to handle peak hour volumes. And they use, as you described, this value system. And for this traffic signal, you gave a 3 for safety, but a 7 for circulation. So this to me means that you're justifying a recommendation at the expense of safety. The safety got a low rating of 3. I did want to say a couple other things I mentioned. Yeah, of course. So I'll go to the second point that no one else has addressed, that if you look at the website, the consultant recommended a traffic signal that $300,000, but not coincidentally, Interis provides software and collateral tools like cameras for traffic signals. And the traffic signal just happens to be in Interis' business model. So I want to propose, it's the beginning of a potential services business for Interis if you provide a traffic signal at that corner. It creates a potential conflict of interest with this consultant. And more disturbing, in my opinion, is a rather important safety issue for the commission to consider. And that is that Interis counts on their website that traffic signals provide the perfect medium for data collection. They use cameras, tickers, Wi-Fi signals to collect data about traffic, bicycles, pedestrian movements. I combed the website to find more information about their data collection practices, what data they collect, what they do with that data, who they share that data, and there is no information about what that data would be collecting once you add a traffic signal. Now, I happen to be an expert in privacy law, and I work every day with technology companies that collect big data. And if you put up a traffic signal as opposed to a stop sign where you can collect this data, we will not necessarily know the data they collect, what they do with that data, and who they share that data with. That's a red flag for anyone in a data collection practices. I hope this commission pauses any idea of a traffic signal at San Marino intersection as it's unsafe for our community.
Would you call her name loudly enough so? I have no idea what the name. Oliver? Thank you.
Richard
Thank you.
Catlin?
Richard Allen. Live on Marine, been there for some time now. I want to thank the committee for spending the time to really look into this issue. It's been an issue, an ongoing issue. I attended a meeting they had at the Summer Center where they just come in, they wrote down what they thought on a map. I don't know what happened to that, but I was there and gave my comments. I also did the surveys. Did my comments about that. So yeah, basically.
Do you have a question that would?
No, it's going to be more of a comment and some suggestions. I did review the report, but I didn't get into too many specifics. I just heard about the meeting yesterday, and I just didn't have time to really go through that report. But I did scan through it. But my main concern is the proposal to put a traffic signal on Lorraine and San Marino. I live pretty close to the corner of San Marino and Lorraine. It's like the fourth house on the south west side, and we experience the traffic there between 4 and 6 o'clock. It's sometimes very difficult for us to get out, and these cars don't stop. They don't let us get out. Unfortunately, we're trying to deal with a problem that's generated by non-resident drivers. We're trying to solve something at the expense of the residents.
Yeah.
So putting a stoplight there, I know is going to create more traffic. Back it up. When the light is red, it's going to go all the way to West Drive. I've seen it go really back almost to West Haven. So it's not going to help the residents. It may help traffic circulation. Kind of reminds you of what happened with the Huntington Drive proposal with the state funding. Everything was based on volume, traffic, but with regard to the residents of San Marino. And we pride ourselves in a community that's the character of the community, the neighborhood, trying to keep it as traditional as possible. Traffic lights in a neighborhood, in a residential area, I just don't see it. And I hope the city, hope the commission, the task force, just delete this particular recommendation altogether and don't bring it back at any other recommendation. So the problem is on San Marino Avenue, especially on San Marino Avenue, is the speed. Drivers, they go through there, don't see that stop sign. And I've seen it where they just drive right through. You just don't see it. And on San Marino Avenue, people are coming, they're trying to, I guess they're trying to bypass San Marino. They go down, let's see, and they speed on Lorraine. Many times I'm driving on Lorraine, and they passed me on the right shoulder, and they passed me on the left shoulder, because I'm trying to go the speed limit, and the speed limit on Lorraine is 30 miles an hour. Fortunately, they changed the speed limit on San Marino to 25 miles an hour, and they've actually put those signal lights, the speed monitoring where it has the police lights. That actually does have an impact, because I've seen it, and people just slow down. So that's a good thing. So what I would suggest, and this is just my thoughts as a resident of San Marino, and some of these are probably in the report, and I kind of glanced through it, but instead of putting a traffic light, I think maybe we should just put a stop line with a red flashing, minimize the red flashing light. If you can see there's a stop sign there. Right now, they just don't see it. I've seen some in South Pass where they have the stop line and they have a little red flashing light. Stop to me. Something like that would be low cost and probably really effective, I think. Put some small speed bumps maybe on San Marino Avenue so that they can stop signs coming. Right now, they have no sense of
Sometimes it's at night, they don't see it. And they just blow right by it. I would suggest that they put that speed monitoring device more often than not on San Marino Avenue, because that does have effect of slowing down traffic. I've seen it a couple times, but I wish they would have it more. And I've actually seen the motorcycle cops or the police officers there too. So that's a good thing. I don't know how process was to change San Marino Avenue to 25 miles an hour, but I would highly suggest that we change Lorraine to 25 miles an hour. This is my opinion. And I know that the issue has been the 85 percentile rule, the mandate. Well, from what I understand, there was a law passed in 2021 that allows cities to bypass that mandate. They can set up what they call safety corridors and lower the speed limit by 5 miles, as long as it's in an area where it's a safety hazard. And on Lorraine, there's a lot of foot traffic, a lot of walkers, a lot of families, a lot of hikers, a lot of joggers. I would think that that would be something that the city should consider doing, is looking at that law. I think it's AB 43 that was signed in one that allows cities to bypass that 5% power rule. Then just a couple more ideas here. And then I noticed that on Lorraine, starting on Sherwood to St. Albans, they have the dual orange stripe line stripes, and that's because it's kind of curvy there, so it prevents people passing. I would suggest that you do that on all of Lorraine so that people don't pass on Lorraine, because they do pass. And if they're passing on Lorraine, that means they're going 35, 40 miles an hour to pass you on the shoulder. Because they've done it to me. They've done it on Lorraine and they've done it on San Marino. They've actually done it on my going north on San Marino. It passed me on my right side. And I just couldn't believe that they do that. That's another suggestion. So those are just some thoughts. I really implore the task force and the committee, get rid of this traffic signal ring, and I would also suggest that we not put any traffic signals and lights anywhere in residential areas in San Marino, because we need to take into consideration and prioritize the residents of San Marino, safety of San Marino, and not high volume or efficiency. Traffic flow is going to benefit the outside non-resident drivers. Thank you.
Don Dustin.
Evening, Commissioners. Don Dustin, 2815 Devonport Road. I don't live anywhere near San Marino and Lorraine, so comments behind. I just had a couple sort of questions, comments to clean this report up before it goes to City Council. In the ITERIS report, I don't know what, it's page 73 of the packet for this meeting. I don't know what page it is in the ITERIS report, but there's a daily vehicle count map that was done. And I'm assuming that the sections of road that you selected for that were again, sort of just at random and sort of limited by, like you picked the intersections, you limited it to 30 something intersections. That's similar to that selection process.
That data actually is not technically part of the work that we did. That was actually data collected by TransTech, which is the city's on-call traffic engineer. They had done a speed study in the city. And so this was just extra data. They had collected 24-hour count data on streets. How they collect that data is if you've driven on streets and you've driven over a tube before, it's a tube placed between intersections. Count firms go out and they find where the most appropriate place to put the tube where it's not going to get damaged or whatever. So that daily volume, because it's the most efficient way to count traffic volumes over a 24-hour period, as opposed to having a video camera and actually having somebody count it. So it's based on tube counts.
Well, then that sort of lets you off the hook for my next comment. So I do data for my professional work. That's healthcare data, but data is data. And I just looked at that and I found a couple of outliers that really sort of make me question those numbers. The first one is on Wembley between Houston and Monterey. If you're familiar with that little section of road, it's not what I would consider to be high traffic volume. It went from slightly over 100 vehicles a day in 2020 to over 4,000, almost 4,000 vehicles the next year. That seems incredulous to me that that change in volume could occur in 1 year. And then also there's a section of Sherwood from Bill Harbison House to San Marino Avenue that dropped from slightly over 2,000 cars a day to about 350 cars a day in that same 1 year period. So I just am leery of the city using that information without maybe sort of checking it for accuracy. And then I have a comment on a correction that I think needs to be made in the agenda report for this meeting. It talks on section 3.1, page 13 of the packet. It indicates the speed on Sierra Madre Boulevard is 40 miles an hour. It's not, it's 35 miles an hour. That was one of the low hanging fruits that was corrected by City Council a couple of years back when they looked at data and they reduced the speed there. I agree with my fellow resident here, Richard, that those signs that the police department puts out are a huge help in reducing traffic speeds, which is really out of control on Sierra Madre. Unfortunately, the signs that the police department puts up on Sierra Madre are not permanent, they're just temporary trailers. I had a suggestion that we talk to the city of Pasadena, because if you look at the speed limit on Sierra Madre, way up north in Pasadena where it runs east-west, it starts at Washington Boulevard in Pasadena and goes all the way down to Del Mar. Speed limit is 35 miles an hour. And then from Del Mar to California, it's 40 miles an hour. And then right in our jurisdiction in San Marino, we change it back to 35. Can't we talk to Pasadena and say, hey, there's this half-mile section that you increase the speed and it's causing us a problem here. Can you make it more consistent? So that's just the suggestion I have. That's it. Thank you.
Emily Burke.
Thank you all for this. My name's Emily Burke. I live at and I was just curious, and maybe this is not in past meetings, on why there was different sites. I'm a mother of 3 out of Lorraine, and they all walk. So when the proposal for the traffic light on Lorraine makes me concerned that we would try more traffic. And my kids aren't going by that. Well, they come home right in school, comes out, they have sports, they have not travel, they have other activities, so they're coming home up till 6 o'clock at night. After it started. So, if we never take consideration about cars back up. School side, or increasing safety for the children that are walking. Isn't that collected?
Sorry, data on the type of pedestrian. There's a pedestrian count at the intersection, but not itemizing it by adults versus kids. There are traffic signals near schools in San Marino and Pasadena. It's not that there aren't traffic signals near schools. That's everywhere.
I will. People back up in their cars. But besides the stripes on the road, there's no extra safety for those bicycles and kids moving through that traffic. And then around the corner at the drop off, it backs up. You know, going to school that. So I think add the traffic lights. There, it will increase or belt our lane. And it's curious if you didn't propose the traffic light at Dunmore and Lorraine when there are no sidewalks at that end. There's also not a traffic light at Oakville and Monterey, but there was great improvements on crossing the street as a pedestrian. There was one house right there, so I'm just curious. That was already an existing condition, that wasn't proposed. Thank you.
Delmar Lorraine. That was looked at along with San Marino Lorraine, the Delmar Lorraine intersection didn't have the higher volume of the two. It had lower, especially the east-west volume between the two intersections. And the short answer is the intersection level of service with, as it is today, is worse at San Marino Lorraine. So it jumped out as more of an intersection that would be better served to have reduced delays, because the average vehicle delay at that intersection was higher than that at Delmar Lorraine.
Or the sidewalks, pedestrian. Or is it both?
That improvement, traffic signal is meant to assign right of way to vehicles. So it is more about moving vehicles. It's not about drawing more vehicles necessarily. That's a function of land use in the area and other particular routes. But the goal is to reduce average vehicle delay with the traffic signal. And the curb extensions that were recommended were, they were put into the design as a potential way for the pedestrians to cross easier, because it's a longer crossing.
Not a safe solution.
Safe for who?
For the pedestrian standing on that corner. If the traffic is going through the street and bringing the care into the street, and people are going to be standing on that corner, means that that person.
Excuse me. Could you speak when you are called upon? Thank you. I'm not trying to cut you off, but just trying to give everybody a chance here. Are there others?
John Hyrose.
My name is Don Hirose. I live on 179 Lorraine Road. Unfortunately, Dale talked to me yesterday. But if this traffic system and the lights go in, what is the estimated cost of this whole system? Are we talking 200,000 here, 1,000, 500,000?
Cost to the city that's in the report. Now these are, admittedly, these are estimates we came up with, did the draft report, which was in 2021, but I believe the number was 300 to 400,000. It depends on it's a planning level cost estimate. So that's what a traffic signal and the associated improvements would cost. Yeah, extension, yeah.
I think one of the ladies here mentioned that cameras, lights, going to stay, whatever.
Yes, that is true. But that's only at the city's request. We would design a traffic signal to the cities. If we were hired to do the next phase of this, which is to design a traffic signal at this intersection, it would be at the city's request. And if they wanted a traffic camera that is made by Iteris, which is a completely separate, I'm on the consulting side of the project of the company, that's the product side, but they wanted to incorporate an Iteris camera in there, they can or they cannot. That's not we we would design the intersection to the specs provided to us by the city. So,
I guess my next question is, okay. You're a consultant and you have another group that provides, I guess, equipment and services to the city. And does your group, I'm an appraiser, work for agencies. In working for the city of San Marino, what assurances have you given them that, hey, this study is not going to be swayed for us to, get business? Those equipment and this section, someone brought up information gathering. You must know, or someone in the company knows, where does that information go to? Is the server here in the United States, or is it somewhere else outside of the United States?
I don't deal with that side of the company now. Data collection, for example, just taking a step back, data collection, we use a separate traffic count firm to count all these intersection volumes. They set up cameras all of 2019. That is the standard way to collect traffic count. Now, those aren't permanent cameras. They put them up, count the data over a 1 day period. The cameras are up for maybe a day or two. They took them down. That happens on every traffic study we work on, any other consultant works on. That's standard practice. I can assure you, we're not doing anything nefarious with the data. We're not using the data that is collected from our cameras, but this is a process that we've done. And the question about ethics or conflict of interest, we're a consultant that does planning studies like these. We have a different group that does signal design, and we have a different group that does products. So I can't say it was explicitly discussed with city staff. It's an arrangement that we've had with several agencies in the past, and it's never been an issue.
I just want to go on record.
Sir, if you could speak into the microphone.
Okay, I just want to go on record. I'm really concerned about amount of traffic that will back up on Lorraine Road. I'm about 5 houses down from the intersection. And in the morning and in the afternoon during rush hours, the cars line up. And one of my main concerns of looking, Bill showed me this, was the extensions of the curb extension. Not being able to make a right hand or left hand turn or right hand turn off Lorraine or coming down San Marino. When you have that curb extension going in, it just narrows everything down. And to me, it's going to cause a lot more traffic. So I'm totally opposed to this like, thank you.
Where's Adnish?
Hello. I would like to thank the commission for their volunteering their time to be on this commission. I know it's a lot of work. Roger for being here, for council members for being here to listen to our feedback, and also for Biz Shaw for expressing that nothing is set in stone, and to let us know that our opinions are valued. I'm opposed to installing a streetlight and the whole plan for the corner of Lorraine and San Marino Avenue, because I believe that this will make traffic worse at this intersection. I want to point out that almost all of the traffic, or a significant amount of the traffic volume at this corner, is actually north-south traffic traveling on San Marino Avenue. And if a traffic light is installed at this corner, the cars traveling east-west on Lorraine Road, who are mostly residents, will wait a long time at the light while they wait for the high volume of cars traveling through town to pass before their light finally turns green. And as a result, this is going to cause cars to pile up on one after the other on Lorraine while they wait for the signal to change. Lorraine residents living near the corner will be seeing cars piling up in front of their homes. And at the moment, that only happens mainly during rush hours. So I'd like to point out also that 2 of the corner homes at this corner are vacant or for sale. And that means that those residents cannot be represented, their voices cannot be heard. And so I'd like to make sure that when you are making your recommendations, you take into account that half of the residents that would be most greatly impacted by this do not have a voice at this moment in the process, but we need to protect everyone, including, our future residents. So I hope you will take that into consideration. I also want to say that the bump outs proposed to will make traffic worse for both directions of traffic, as has been mentioned by other residents who have spoken before me. It is quite easy on all 4 corners to make right turns because of the width of the roads, and that helps stop cars from piling up. But regardless, it's not just the bump outs that are the problem here, it's the whole proposal for the traffic light. As others have said, the traffic backup along San Marino Avenue stems from problems with the signals and the number of lanes at Huntington Drive that funnel so many cars down San Marino Avenue or through San Marino Avenue. So I do believe that there are some good solutions proposed by both residents that have spoken before and in the consultant's report that are much better solutions than this proposed traffic light. So the proposal to funnel just 1 lane across Huntington Drive instead of 2, I believe that will help funnel fewer cars at a time, fewer cars per green light at a time, and that will help reduce a lot of the backup along San Marino Avenue. So that's also a much less drastic measure and much more inexpensive. So I think that is really well worth looking at as an initial remedy for our problem. And then the last thing I want to point out is that San Marino Avenue is designed to be a larger thoroughfare through town. It was designed like that by our founding designers, let's say. And for that reason, the homes are orientated away from San Marino Avenue. So people who live on San Marino Avenue, they have walls, garages, they are somewhat protected from traffic there. And that is because I think that they were designed to and expected to contain a certain amount of traffic going through town. By contrast, Lorraine Road is a fairly sleepy, very residential street. And we are orientated, our homes are orientated to the front, to the street. So if people, a traffic light would definitely cause traffic to back up along Lorraine Road in front of the front lawns of people living on Lorraine. So essentially, this would change the character of Lorraine, and it would be largely at our expense, and the effect on San Marino Avenue will be limited. So thank you very much.
The last of the speaker cards I received, I do have several on Zoom as well as email.
Right? Those Zoom. Please identify themselves. Again, we would hope that those of you who are waiting have a chance to speak. We're hearing from you.
Hi, I've just unmuted. My name is Jeff. I'm a resident on Lorraine Road, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak and to be heard. I appreciate the that the commission has appreciate the opportunity for public comment. I just heard of the meeting this morning and was not aware of even the traffic report that had been commissioned. I have been a resident of 20 years, and I'll keep my comments short. I agree with much of, probably almost all of what has been said by the resident living on Lorraine. My only comment really is that I'm not sure that the study takes into account that 90% of the traffic is only in the morning and the evening, and that during the day, that is not during those hours, traffic is fairly light. I've been having to work at home during the pandemic, and so I spend every morning almost, I would say, I spent probably over 300 days walking walking in the area early in the morning. And I will tell you, I know the difference between traffic at 6:30 and traffic at 8 o'clock. And then, of course, if I have errands to run at 5, I see what the traffic volumes are. So my really comment is that I do oppose for all the reasons that have been shared, but primarily because I do not believe the study takes into account when the traffic volume is, and only takes into account when, the amount of volume during the course of the day. And so I just wanted to make my comments to the committee. Thank you.
You do.
Dean, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Public Safety Commission, and I appreciate the time to speak with City Council Member Gretchen and Chief John Incontro. I thank you. We've been in San Marino Avenue since 1970, and my grandfather on Euclid in San Marino from 1950. So we're longtime residents, and one of the things that I'd like to say is I appreciate this voice. But I see that so far we've had a lot more people on the Lorraine Road issue, and we're just here north of you on San Marino Avenue. And one of my favorite things with, I think Mayor Stephen Talt was there, but he was in the audience at the time, he wasn't on council. It was summer of 2014, and I believe it was Councilman Richard Sun said the best cities are 50 years behind the times. And one of the things, I think we had a speaker, Richard, spoke about, we need to take care of the citizens. And I don't want us to shift traffic from Lorraine Road and make it gridlock on San Marino Avenue, because there are no walls on San Marino Avenue on the west side. There's one house that's got like a 3-foot wall. We can't back out after 4 or 5 o'clock. Are we going to be calling the police department to let us get out? So we don't want lane reductions. We don't want these wide curbs. I'm sure they make great architectural designs and they're great for modern new options, but they don't work for San Marino. That's just not what we need. I think that if we have non-metered crosswalks are great. I also liked what I believe the gentleman Richard spoke, the citizen, about having on Sierra Madre Boulevard, that little mobile thing that shows you your speed and flashes. That's great. But if we can't get out during the week at 4 or 5 o'clock, and I believe my previous speaker, Jeff, talked about that, or if you're working from home, creating this gridlock is just a nightmare. And then are we going to call the police once a week to say we need to get in our drive or get out of our drive? So I think we're creating problems for at least San Marino Avenue. And it sounds like from Lorraine, I feel for you guys on Lorraine. It sounds like we're creating problems where there are none, because if we can't get out, are we going to call you, chief, and say, hey, send an officer, hold off traffic because it's down to 1 lane and we can't get out of San Marino Avenue? And we've been here since 1970. Traffic is that way.
Would you please state again where on San Marino Avenue you are?
Yes, 1351 San Marino Avenue. 1351.
Is that north of Huntington or south?
Yes, north of Huntington Drive. So as it would come southbound, you would have cars backed up.
I just want to make sure that we direct the question correctly, which is having to do with the impact of narrowing San Marino Avenue north of Huntington.
Yes.
What is the expected result of that study?
I'm saying empirically from living here, we've grown up here and we see it, and you can see it starts to get trafficky more and more, and it's hard. If you're gonna if we're gonna do an errand and we want to say, hey, we're gonna have to go out at 4 or 5 o'clock, sometimes we'll back out our car and park it on the street so we can get out. And the one day a year that we know you can't back out is on New Year's Day after the Rose Parade, or this year it was on the 2nd, because on Sunday, the Rose Parade moves it back a day. All right, so you know you don't back out of your driveway before 2, or if you do, pull out your car and park it by the inset, that little inlet where the little shops are on San Marino Avenue. And if you needed to get your car, one day a year is fine, but every day of this, are we gonna talk to our neighbors here on San Marino Avenue and have the police department on speed dial to send an officer so that we can get in or out of our driveways because you cut it down to 1 lane?
Thank you.
That sounds like a nightmare.
I see no other raised hands. I do have emails that were received prior to the meeting.
Hi, my name is Joel Newton. I'm 3 houses. Voice of people at that intersection. I feel bad for you because like everyone's attacking you, but you did a study, right? You're telling us what the data said. But the question is this, because a lot of the residents are saying first, but your recommendation is like saying, hey, this is what will fix the problem. But I keep hearing delay reduction. Is there any differentiation between delays north-south, specifically southbound versus east-west?
That would depend on the traffic volume and the time of day. San Marino and Lorraine is a little more. There's not one easy answer to that question. Okay, so
Is the problem, people are being delayed. And we know a percentage, 80% of that problem that you're tasked with solving, north-south or east-west?
I have to really look into the numbers. We have all that data.
Okay.
But yes, it's part of the, so right now, every vehicle has to stop. So whether it's not a question of who's stopping, everybody's stopping.
Nobody is. It's a big question.
Yeah,
So
well, no,
that's-
there's
that's
more
what-
volume in the north-south direction than there is in the east-west. Like I said, it depends on the time of day. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I believe the AM peak hour, it's heavier in the southbound direction, vice versa in the northbound direction. So again, it is determined by the time of day.
Is reduction on cars a data point that you're even considering? Or is it simply trying to increase the throughput of the number of cars?
For this particular improvement, it's increasing, it's reducing the delay, which in turn increases the throughput. Yes.
Yeah. So I think the problem is, an answer is as good as the question. And I think what a lot of the residents are expressing is, we like the delay in many ways, because the more San Diego does not turn into Atlantic or San Gabriel, the more that people from Pasadena, where there is, you said that number of cars is about land use. Well, there are only new houses in San Diego. There are new apartments in Pasadena. There are new apartments in Ottawa. These increased cars going through are people using our neighborhood as a major throughfare, but it's not. From the 210 Huntington, it just is. We can't. But this street does not go to 10. Delmar does. And it does. I lived on Lost Road. Like when you are on one of those north-south routes, you have that traffic. But the longer if a traffic light just says, hey, we're going to get more cars through faster, that feels like we're answering the wrong problem. The problem is, like, would your firm ever recommend just blocking Huntington and saying, hey, this is going to be a pedestrian only street from here forward? Like it's like that's not even.
We want to be higher.
I mean, that's not even on the menu, because you're prepared to say, hey, how do we get the number of non-San Diego resident cars? You required to study that, you might come up with a completely different recommendation. But I think that's what we're all expressing, is we think the problem is too many cars going too fast. and you're going, hey, all these people from Pasadena that are trying to get to Alhambra, Dad, I have to slow down to Lorraine, let's get them through faster. And so it's like, we're arguing, but it's like two completely different questions being answered. So obviously, I lived there, I'm against the traffic light, I don't know how many people were against it, out of the 100 who filled out the study, about 100 more were against it on Lorraine. But like, I really think the city needs to ask a consultant the question that the residents are reflecting. And that's not on you. If circulation is what you're trying to improve, you're probably recommending the right thing. Like, we're all telling you that'll make it worse, but then I see you like holding your tongue, and you're doing a good job composing yourself because we're all telling you you're wrong. And I know you've done math, and I know you've done the study, and I know you like you're saying, no, this actually why we're recommending. I think it's just an issue of two completely conflicting questions. So anyway, thank you.
Audley Botnish.
Great. I'm sorry for interruption earlier. Just, I'm a civil engineer. I've been living in this city for years. My issue with safety of the design, not just Lorraine. The time you bring air, is basically you're cutting the, for example, for San Marino, you're cutting the lane of the water of the bringing the care. That's area you have a stop sign and have people standing on that curb, waiting for the traffic to change and bring it across. While they are standing there, people are going to be coming most of the time. Because you have people standing in the line of the traffic, that creates hazards and people will be hit by these cars. So did anybody study the value of bringing these cars into the street in line of the traffic? Do you have any study on that from other cities?
So we're talking about a couple things here. The purpose of a curb extension, reducing the crossing distance, is to make the distance crossed by the pedestrian shorter. Now, you're describing a person standing on the curb being closer to vehicle traffic. If they're standing on the curb today and cars turn against that, they are also close to fast turning vehicles. I guess I'm not quite understanding. Yeah.
They're standing on the curb. The curb is not in the street. The curb is outside the street. Yeah, your curb is going to be in the middle of the street. It's going to be 12 feet inside the street. Versus most design, when they design streets, they try to put the people outside the driving lanes, not in front of people driving. Like, look at all the streets in San Marino and any city in around us. There's no curb swing inside the street. Most curbs swing outside the street.
The vehicles would not be, that is not a travel lane that the vehicles would be faced. The travel lane would still be, would be condensed. So it's not like a vehicle would be directly, the vehicle that's traveling would be directly facing a person standing on a curb. Person standing on the curb would actually be in the parking lane. How utilized on-street parking is, I'm not going to speculate. It seems like it's not very utilized, which is a whole broader topic as to why a lot of speeds on streets like Lorraine and Monterey, why it's easier and more encouraging for drivers to drive faster is the streets appear wider. They may not actually be wider in some cases, but if there's no on-street parking, then they appear wider. So I guess my point is, no, we would not have a person, and the curb would not be front of a travel lane, the direction of a travel lane. The design shows that, then we can modify it, but I don't believe the design shows that way.
Are there any other questions? You want to handle those?
So the emails were received prior to the meeting and distributed to the Public Safety Commission and to the public. So I'll be providing a summary of each comment and full comments will be viewed on the city. Received an email from Lori Barlow. The comment is opposed to an intersection revision at Lorraine and San Marino. Recommends to instead outline turn lanes and install blinking lights on stop signs. We received an email from Eileen Hale. The comment is opposed to the installation of a traffic light at the intersection of Lorraine and San Marino and agrees with the restriping of the southbound lanes on Sierra Madre Boulevard. Comment is also suggests reconfiguring the green light cycle at Huntington and San Marino. We received an email from Anna and George Cabot. The comment is opposed to a street light at Lorraine and San Marino and expressed concern for speed limit violators between San Marino Avenue and Mission Street. We received an email from Jeffrey Lynn. The comment is opposed to a redesign of the intersection of San Marino and Lorraine. The redesign would create a bottleneck by limiting right turn traffic and block residents' driveways. Finally, we received an email from Tiffany Lynn. The comment is opposed to proposed measures for the intersection of Lorraine and San Marino Avenue. The proposal would create longer lines of cars waiting at the intersection and make left turns nearly impossible.
Thank you. And thank you all for your input. The traffic task force will have your comments. We'll be able to consider those along with their other, the other material that they developed from reading the report. And those comments will, I assure you, be presented to the Commission when we in fact do again meet to discuss the report itself, the recommendations made, and the forwarding of it to the City Council. At this point, I would invite members of the Public Safety Commission to ask questions of the consultant. Mr. Pfeffer, do you have questions?
Been a long evening. But again, the Traffic Safety Commission, of course, advisory body to make recommendations to the City Council to set policy. So the goal is not to, but I personally think of the traffic study, but merely to ask questions that I have. So on the towards the end of the report, Terrace page list basically the source materials, if you will. There are 3 listed: the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO, Urban Street Sign Guide, Project for Public Spaces, Traffic Calming Toolbox, and Los Angeles County Model Design Manual for Living Streets. Streetsignmanual.com is on their website. Just having worked with four public entities continuously since 1990, familiar with what Squiggers is, the Caltrans manual. It jumped out at me that, for instance, the Caltrans manual, which is relied on heavily by literally every single public entity in the state of California, but is there a reason Iteris didn't list the Caltrans manual as a source material? As it does address several factors. Why is it not listed in the book?
Are you talking about the literature review memo that we did?
It's your report of 3 source materials. I just cited them. Again, it jumped out at me reading the report that the Caltrans source.
I don't have an answer for that. We can look into that. I'm not familiar with. I'm familiar.
Familiar how familiar cities, counties are with the Caltrans now heavily just one.
Yes.
Why was it only one?
It was not, the report includes, the report is based on data collected. Bring up a good point. I don't have an answer. I have to check on why it was not.
Why is the project of public spaces versus based on New York City? City of San Marino, of course, is uniquely residential character. We're comprised of exclusively single-family residents in San Marino's 3.75 square miles in Los Angeles County, which I don't have to tell you. Palmdale, Lancaster, Long Beach, family, it's very large, and yet we comprise 3.75 square miles of exclusively single-family residences, and yet your company chose to rely on a source material for inspiration, measures, and recommendations. Project for Public Spaces, which is based out of New York City. I think San Marino is probably one of the most diametrically opposite character and nature in every measurable way from New York City. But yet you did not use the Caltrans manual. Yes. Are you aware that the Caltrans manual, found at dot.state.gov, it's the state of California, actually contains pedestrian safety countermeasures toolbox. Caltrans manual actually sets out the box. Listed in a report from New York City-based public interest.
Correct.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to find out why your organization would rather rely on a public interest organization based out of New York City for pedestrian safety countermeasures toolbox, rather than using the Caltrans manual pedestrian safety countermeasures toolbox.
I don't have a great answer. The pedestrian countermeasures we've incorporated into this study are they're not anything radical as far as I say. They're not curb extensions. They're mid-block crosswalks, everything that goes into the traffic calming toolbox, which, like I said, is not site specific. It's a toolbox of menu options for the city to use. Those are fairly standard measures. They're not, in my opinion, they're not anything that is strictly New York related, but you're right, that Caltrans, having to choose between the two, the Caltrans is the more applicable one.
It wasn't even relied upon at all, not listed as a source material reference. The Caltrans pedestrian safety countermeasures toolbox does have a number of tools in the toolbox. First one being signal timing and phasing, which several members of the community have mentioned today. Asked questions regarding Green and San Marino, as that's been covered. Many residents here. I've been a resident of this town for 27 years. I do walk every morning. Pedestrian, I walk 3 to 5 miles on an exercise walk. So pedestrian safety is paramount importance to me since I'm a pedestrian here in town. But I noticed some of the measures. I do notice I'm very familiar with every single intersection, 5 intersections identified here in the report as needing action. I also noticed the ITERIS report did not at all refer to US DOT's Federal Highway Administration report as material. There's a report, the safety effects of marked versus unmarked crosswalks at uncontrolled locations, final report and recommended guidelines. Are you aware that there's a body of literature based on study that installing marked crosswalks without an accompanying light may lead to detrimental reliance of pedestrians using an intersection to cross where they were not otherwise, that can increase pedestrian accidents?
Oh, I'm aware of that. If you put a crosswalk in, so pedestrians will cross it. So it could increase the increase the volume of pedestrians that.
Not just the volume of pedestrian, well, right. So
Which could
the
increase-
purpose of a marked crosswalk is to channelize pedestrian traffic, right? Because we have unmarked crosswalks by law. The point of making a marked pedestrian crosswalk is to channelize. So for instance, you have a four-way intersection in the city where the public entity makes a decision to put in a crosswalk on the northern leg or southern leg or eastern or western leg of the intersection. That is that public entity's desire to channelize pedestrians to cross at that one location versus another, right? So it's a deliberate decision of where to place the crosswalk, right? So again, it's not just a feeling that the DOT, federal DOT, well, are you aware of the Herms and Gibby studies about pedestrian behavior? Okay, so that's why it might be helpful in a further iteration of the report to actually read the Federal Highway Administration Research and Technology report. Again, safety facts of marked versus unmarked crosswalks at the locations. Final report and recommendation guidelines. They cite the Herms and Gibby studies, which are done including in San Diego, which again is much closer to San Marino than New York City is. But the studies show repeatedly that when a marked crosswalk is put in without an accompanying traffic light, that actually increases traffic accidents, pedestrian accidents, and even pedestrian fatalities. Are you aware of that body of literature for the studies?
I'm not.
Given that, would you think it's a good idea to read that literature before recommending putting in a pedestrian crosswalk at Huntington, Bedford, without an accompanying light?
Absolutely.
Because if you put in a crosswalk, a marked crosswalk at Huntington, Bedford, where there isn't one right now, that's the city telling pedestrians we would like to cross, right? As opposed to walking to San Marino or to the next light, right? So is there any interest in looking at the literature as to whether studies as to if the city does put in a marked crosswalk across Huntington Drive without a light, that might encourage more pedestrians to cross that?
Yeah, that is of interest, and I will.
So is one of the goals of this report to reduce accidents?
Reduce that.
That's something I really think is helpful to look into. With respect to the, well, you're actually reducing the roadway at Los Robles and Mission Street. First of all, you referred to that area as downtown, but Los Robles and Mission is not downtown. It's really oh, that's not.
Sorry.
All right. So with respect to Los Robles and Mission Street, what you talk about, because it's not a perfect 90-degree angle there, that it takes longer for pedestrians to cross. Which direction does it take longer for pedestrians to cross?
In either direction, it's the west lane we're talking about. I'm not saying it takes longer for northbound pedestrian or southbound.
Well, no, eastern or western lane versus northern or southern lane.
The western leg is the longest. North and south are, I believe, the shortest, and west is the longest, east is the second longest.
What's the traffic signal timing phase of Los Robles?
There's a timing phase.
Right. So green light, yellow light, red light. I'll just, that's what I would.
The permissive turning phase. So
The report tries to justify reducing the width of the roadway because it takes too long for pedestrians to cross. The question is, how long is the light phase for Los Robles, north and south, and then Mission east and west? Green, yellow, red.
I don't have that. I don't have that.
You don't know?
I don't have it.
That'd be important to know before recommending actually reducing the size of the roadway.
Well, it would reduce the crossing time. Okay? Whether I have it stated numerically or not, the crossing times are established by the length of the crosswalk and the average speed of a pedestrian, which is 3.5
So right,
Seconds.
making a road shorter, of course, does decrease
Right.
pedestrian. So my confusion is a justification for a light being proposed at Lorraine and San Marino is because we want to move the cars through. Get out. So pedestrians don't have to wait, right? And again, I've walked through Lorraine and San Marino the countless times. So, you know, when I'm a pedestrian on Lorraine, crossing at San Marino, you know, hardly goes, then I go, right? If there's a light, the pedestrians on Lorraine have to wait longer. Right? But at Los Robles, the hope is, well, now pedestrians, we want it to be a shorter distance, a shorter time for them to cross the road. So we need to narrow the road so pedestrians have the advantage. So are you prioritizing pedestrians crossing quickly or pedestrians waiting for cars to move?
A little bit of both. Like I said in the beginning, the recommendations were there to strike a balance between these two competing interests of non-vehicle movement and vehicle movement.
Ideal.
I couldn't speculate on the exact timing of that, just that reduce the curve, you increase the curb length and reduce the crossing distance, then the amount of time will be shorter. When we can put that,
Which is the light phase the same? So the time it's green on Los Robles is the same amount of time it's green on.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Important to know, or making a recommendation to narrow the road.
That would be when the city puts this phase in, puts its curbs in, then there would be adjustments to signal timing as needed based on the demand of the road.
Are you aware that there's already the pedestrian subdivision and population of Los Robles, so pedestrians just cross the road as they walk things?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, we're not saying that there's not a walk phase, we're saying that the walk phase, using the west leg as the example here, the longest, the walk phase is long. And this could be made shorter. It'd still be a walk phase.
How long does it take?
Typically a walk phase,
Not typically here, making a recommendation for this section. How long is the walk phase?
and I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Has the city received for nights for pedestrians saying after that time to safely cross the western lane of the intersection of
I don't think so. I don't know.
seeing a solution to a problem?
I don't know. I mean, this is an effort to improve pedestrian circulation at this location, and
But is there a pedestrian circulation problem?
based on public input, I would say, I guess not. I don't have,
And the curb cut is, what's the point to use the southern entrance to the gas station? Is the proposal that entrance go away?
at this point, the design is conceptual, so it's not a final design.
Has it design been provided to the owners of the gas station? Is this report proposing that southern entrance to the gas station shut? So the road can be narrowed, so pedestrians don't be in the street as well.
That's not what we're proposing, to modify that entrance, but if that would need to be considered for this was to move through and go more detailed design, that would need to be looked at.
Study, analyze the number of pedestrians at the intersection.
It was part of our pedestrian count, yes.
What is it?
I don't have that number in front of me. It's part of our data, part of the report. It's collected, so I can find that information. Again, it was one day of traffic counts, which had pedestrian and bike counts at each intersection.
Likewise, were any pedestrian counts conducted for the proposed crosswalk?
No, pedestrian counts were not collected. There's no crosswalk today. It was not a study intersection for traffic analysis purposes. Therefore, there was none.
Were there, I just not sure of the locations of the different accidents in town, were there any, and I just don't know, where, you looked at the splitter scale, which I know breaks down the type of accidents. Were there any pedestrian person motor vehicle accidents at the intersection where the crosswalk was proposed to go? Okay, so right now you're not aware of any?
I'm not aware of the exact details of the data, other than, like I said during the presentation, that the majority of the collisions at that intersection were broadside.
Right, but if the court is seeking to install a marked crosswalk across Huntington Drive without an accompanying light, given the published studies, or the one published study, indicating that installing a marked crosswalk without an accompanying light will increase, has shown to increase pedestrian accidents, even fatalities. Would it be helpful to know the number of current pedestrian versus motor vehicle accidents at that same site where a marked crosswalk is being proposed?
Yeah. Procedures.
But we don't have that data.
We have the splitters data.
But it wasn't put in. Again, is there a need for a crosswalk?
Need to look at that further. If you're judging need by,
No, I'm asking. I mean,
well, if
well,
you're saying need by, is there a pedestrian vehicle conflict accident history? And we can find that out.
need for any of this. I mean, these are recommendations, presumably, these are proposed solutions to problems, correct? Your company identified problems. There are 5 locations in the city that need a solution, right?
They're not always data-driven problems. These are,
Theological problems.
well, they are,
Think tanks in New York City.
they're pedestrian recommendations. I'll just, say it's not always data-driven issue. For example, there's, I don't know how the intersection at Kenilworth, the crosswalk at Kenilworth with the flashing beacon came about. The east is.
But that's not the report. There's a new one that's being proposed. Again, given the literature, again, multiple studies of pedestrian data safety, there's smart crosswalk without light. I would hope that in a further iteration of the report, there's an analysis done as to whether there's an actual need justifying the recommendations.
We will do.
Likewise, if there is an issue at Los Robles emission, it seems appropriate to agree to consider first proposal in the Caltrans manual addressing issues of signal timing based countermeasure blocks. That again, perhaps instead of spending money to narrow a street so pedestrians aren't in the street as long to cross, that your company consider the very first toolbox item in the toolbox proposed by Caltrans of signal timing phasing, and maybe just take the walk extra second. That's something that your company would consider, the actual first priority listed.
We're not talking about increasing the walk time. We're talking about reducing walk time by the which you could not, yeah, which you could not do if you didn't narrow the street. Because you have to meet a minimum based on
If
distance.
pedestrians, from your view, is there's not an identified problem of pedestrians crossing Los Robles emission, correct? Like that's not a problem right
We have to look at the switch data.
now. Okay, so we're not aware of any problem.
Did not
of
come up-
pedestrians crossing Los Robles
Did not
emission,
come out during public.
and yet your company is recommending the city of San Marino expend money to actually narrow a street for the benefit of pedestrians who may or may not already have a problem crossing.
Recommendations.
All right, Dave, I like.
We heard a lot about Lorraine, San Marino. Their residents do not want a signal light. The second issue is Sierra Madre and Robles. I think it was Dustin that recommended a signal light there. I happen to live pretty near that intersection, and I know that there are speed problem, and I know that speed limits been reduced. It's helped, but we still have access. I hear honking every day at the intersection. I think the main issue is cars merging from Robles onto Sierra Madre. Don't yield to oncoming traffic. They just cut right in front of them, and then cars have to swerve to avoid them. And sometimes they end up in the median. One time it ended up my side hedge to the front of my house. So I think that's the main issue is how to get cars to not merge dangerously. Don't know what can be done. A signal would help, along with a no right turn on red sign. That's something that we can look at. And also the crosswalk. I understand what Elizabeth is saying. I believe a previous traffic engineer also looked at that and said he didn't recommend it because it gives someone false sense of security trying to cross Sierra Madre, because that's a blind curve. If you're crossing eastbound on Robles, there's a lot of high school students that do that. With a crosswalk, they're going to think, cars are just going to stop. But as I recall, he said it's probably better that they cross with some fear so that they're more alert. So if you put the crosswalk, it may give them a false sense of security. So also look at putting that crosswalk at intersection. Hopefully.
Thank you. Commissioner Mozelle, do you have questions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Hey, thank you for going through all this. It's obviously experience for everyone. It's been great answering questions. I'm more educated. Obviously, fully understand the address report, which I think we've done a little bit. From there, I'd also like to say thank you to the residents for coming out. Obviously, it was a very clear signal about Lorraine and San Marino Avenue. To the task force, to Amber, I think the importance of communication with this report, especially where changes are being proposed and we don't necessarily have presence here because we probably don't have someone like Dale. Communicating is key. I think it shows some other problems, but not for this meeting. I think my biggest takeaway from this is, as I think Joe said, and I apologize to get your last name, for a lot of the report's suggestions is the wrong problem being addressed. And what I mean by that is reducing the vehicle delay, as opposed to what I'm hearing from the community is reducing the number of vehicles going through there in terms of not making an easy way to get home for people outside the community. The speed associated with what those interactions are happening at, and then also the safety both for the vehicles going through that area, the residents in the area, and then people crossing the street. So really my takeaway is, for Amber and the traffic task force, really our first pass of this, I think like the feedback is making sure for each of the recommendations in the toolbox, possibly with the Caltrans, focus on California specific solutions. Is it right? And I think right now, kind of what we heard back in the earlier version of this report from 2-3 years ago, maybe we're still kind of answering the wrong question for some of these intersections. So maybe not your fault, maybe the state and the work, et cetera, was kind of focused the wrong place. But I don't think this report is addressing the needs of the people in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. It's clear that there's a disconnect between the goal of the Iteris report, which seems to be traffic circulation, and the desires of the community, which seem to be traffic control, speed control, safety focus. Not sure that there's anything we can do about that at this point, because I suspect that Harris has answered the question they were asked. But again, I want to echo the comments of others, thanking you so much for being here, for taking the time to answer our questions, to help us understand the information in the report. We will study it carefully. We'll prepare recommendations for the city council after we've received the additional input from the task force. I assume that your organization would be available if we were to ask for your time.
Yes.
Thank you. At this point, I believe it would be appropriate for us to have a motion to receive and hold the report until we receive the recommendations of the traffic task force and complete our analysis. Is there such a motion? Motion from Mr. Chang, a second. Second. Those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Commissioner Moselle, did you vote aye?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Unanimous. That brings us to the end to item 1. Before we go into item 2, I suggest we take about a 7-minute break and try to I'd like to take a minute or two long, but then we try to make it needed about 8:30.
They're just positive.
we're moving on to item 2, the San Marino Police Department's Crime Suppression Plan. Ms. Blonde?
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commission. I'll try to be brief. Essentially, back in October of 2022, myself and our records, all our bureau got together to discuss some different tactics and ways that we could impact crime occurring in the city. And in doing so, we took a look at a few different areas of the crime that we were looking at. There was an increase in crime as far as residential burglaries, 2022. However, we also compared those stats previous year. That's what those are compared to. And then we looked back a little bit further, and what we found was that essentially burglaries, while they were up in 2022 compared to 2021, when you look at the pre-pandemic levels, there's actually a very small decrease of about 3%. That being said, we got together and we formed a plan to attack again the problem that we have, the rise that we saw in 2022. And we believe that in order to reduce crime, that would be best to attack it from different angles. One being community messaging. Next, personnel and community engagement training, patrol briefings from our detectives and outside investigators, suppression details, and decoy operations to include tracking device deployment out in the community. The first step, as far as the messaging, the police department started doing that, and that consists of website information put out, social media, message board, if you might have seen it out in front of City Hall, and email list and pushing out emails to the different residents and list of people so that we could make sure that everybody was in the know about what was going on. The messaging was, as you know, if you see something, say something, locking your doors or windows, etc. And we got that out, and we're going to continue to put that out. The next step was training aspect that I mentioned, as far as our personnel. Our personnel have gone to specialized training to help educate the residents while doing reviews of their property to see what could be improved at their property. We're going to be doing that more and more, but we've had a couple people go to specialized training for that. Also training to help protect and deter crime within the city at the same time. Our patrol briefings have also expanded to the point where we're having our detectives more than normal go in and provide additional information to the patrol so that they can impact the areas that are hit the hardest. Some of those items include heat maps, and the heat maps are a map that basically will show different levels of consistent crimes and heat. A heat map showing you where it's been impacted the most. We can focus our patrol efforts to those areas and hopefully make a difference. There's also a predictive policing map that we have through our technology. We use those to help with the different algorithms and things that go on to help figure out where crime might occur next. The suppression details that we ran, we actually did one recently. That's another component of the plan. The suppression details are basically focused patrol above and beyond what's out and deployed on a normal basis. We have people come on either on overtime or staying after a shift to go put in some extra hours in different areas of the city, like you mentioned, where there's the biggest problems. Final two steps, decoy operations and tracking devices. Those consist of a variety of different things. Sometimes a police car parked in a certain area to get their crime. And also tracking devices. Our detectives will put out tracking devices with packages in areas to hopefully entice the suspect into if they're trying to steal it. With that, staff recommends that the commission review and discuss the San Marino Police Department crime suppression plan. We've already, like I mentioned, started putting a lot of these things into place, and we'll continue to do so moving forward. That concludes my report.
Questions? Okay.
Yes, you talk about community involvement. We ever thought about having like citizen patrol, like some cities, they have citizens driving around and their own type of cars, I guess.
We actually, we answer your question. We actually have in the past. Recently, we have not. But what we found was that you would still have a car that was not your personal vehicle. The way we looked at it was potentially having a volunteer program where they were given a vehicle from the city, or vehicles, plural, I don't know how many we had.
but they would have like a uniform and that kind of thing. So we considered it in the past, but recently not, so good idea.
Okay, so consider that, please, and then, along the same lines, like a citizen academy. The forum that's coming up on the 19th. Is San Marino Security invited to that? Is, you know how we did like the Ring, we did a promotion with Ring. We gave them residents $100 off, maybe perhaps, you know, to encourage people installing alarms. They can offer some kind of special or.
So specifically, San Marino Security was not like individually invited, only and the ways Ring was not, Ring kind of came to different cities and asked at the time that we did that. It did generate a lot of interest, and I saw the turnout was great for that. But the deal with that was that we were not saying that Ring is the alarm company you have to go with, and there's a good reason for that, is the liability that's involved with it. We wouldn't suggest one specific one. We just want somebody to have something. We would like them to have the best, but whatever that might be. However, alarm in general is what we want to have. But the question as far as the academy, we do have them coming. Commander Tevitz is actually in the process of formulating that. We've only done one, but we're with COVID and everything, we're looking to make a comeback. I think we're going to be starting it sometime around April. We'll be putting more information out about that. That's kind of that's for the academy.
My last question is I don't know if I can answer this now, but do we have enough officers? Do we need to increase the number of officers on the street? And of course, the budget would have to go along with that, but how do we come up with the numbers that we have now?
We've been dealing with the same number of personnel. We've estimated roughly since the 50s. So request has been generated. We've been talked about it as far as producing a couple additional at our top level as far as full sworn. So we'll be putting that forward to council with the budget process. So to answer your question, I mean, more would be better because there's more out there to have eyes on the street. So I think any little bit will help. The council's been very generous with the number that we've gotten in the past. They've allowed us to exceed our maximum. But what we're going to be asking going forward is to make that a normalized or a number.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brazil.
Yes, thank you. One question. How long have these measures been in place? I know you're working on some of them. Some of them have been in place. You've had some training, some not. And during that time, have we seen a market improvement in any of the metrics that we use to measure crime in the city?
Yes, thank you. So we started putting some of it in place in December, but it was just the messaging to the community. And unfortunately, in December, as probably most know, that was probably one of the heights for burglaries. And I think it has a lot to do probably with, for one, people being out of town, valuables in the house and so on. So I don't think the impact that we want, the plan is not fully in place, and it's something that would be ongoing throughout the course of the year. It's not something that would be accomplished in a 30-day, 60-day. It's something that we would need to conduct ongoing throughout the year. So I think we'll have to reassess it and see how things are going, maybe quarter by quarter, just to see what impact we've made. But thus far, the items that have been put in place are some of the suppression details, the messages to the community, and then patrol briefings have started. And so the goal is to continue to give patrol the information they need on motives of the suspects, where they're making entry, what kind of cars they're driving, what groups they're running with, that type of thing. So it's an ongoing process, and thus far we haven't seen the true impact of the suppression plan.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further, Chair.
Similar to Commissioner Chang, account plan, like a public safety officer, just more eyes kind of drive around the community. Your officers, when they come now with the lights on the houses, kind of like a lighthouse of police through random hours. Just curious, is that available now, or is it still training?
Well, one of the sergeants that was in here, Jeremy Bestman, I was looking to see if he was still to my back here, but he went to some of that training. It is available. the way we're trying to get it out to the community primarily is through the Neighborhood Watch. So block captains are our best source of getting the information out. A lot of our residents don't have, whether they have social media, email, et cetera. So the best method typically is through our block captains. So another thing that we've implemented is that anytime we have a crime that occurs, and we usually put out a press release, that normally goes out to the media. We realize that it's not going to hit all of our residents. So what we do is we take that same press release and now we shoot it to all the block captains, and we kind of empower them, if you will, to talk to their fellow residents and say, here's what's been going on. So, yeah.
Percentage of the additional cost is about, or 200 hours. So just 5 weeks, then of one FTE, is that really it for this budget plan, or is it like that value to want this involved in the plan?
Yeah, this
like a light touch so far.
Yeah, this is very, very much an estimation, and speaking to the chief about this, basically, the thought was that if we saw that this was not going to even scratch the surface for whatever reason, that we would actually come back and ask for an appropriation of funds from the council, city council, for additional overtime. We obviously have an overtime budget, but we were looking at to have this be one of its own. So if we saw that we were going to be putting in lots of hours of overtime, the goal is not to make this entirely an overtime suppression plan. It's to use resources, whether it's detectives that are on duty, directed patrol for people that are on duty on patrol, and not just say this is just overtime. So the goal would not to be just making an overtime detail to combat the plan. And if we did need funding for whatever reason, or we felt like it was going to exceed this amount, we were going to go to the council.
We've been asked to recommend the adoption of this plan to the city council. Several questions have been raised this evening. Are you comfortable that the plan is comprehensive as it is prepared and is in a form that can be considered as an ongoing plan?
Yeah, I do feel comfortable in the plan. I always feel that as time goes on and we assess it, if changes, we need to be able to be flexible. So if we see that something's not working, and like the points made tonight about citizens on patrol and that type of thing, I'll be honest, that's not something that we considered for the plan, but we've looked at it in the past. So there's things like that, that if we start looking at it and it's not doing what we want, then we need to make changes. We stuck to this and we were willing to accept failure, then that's not good either. So I think we just have to be flexible, but I am comfortable with the plan.
Would that be more appropriate?
Put on the agenda to follow up.
Why don't we suggest then that the council that, or would it be appropriate that we ask them to adopt it? Or would it simply, is this something that the police department itself can adopt? We simply ask that the plan be shared with. I'm struggling with, do we really have a document here, a plan that needs to be approved by the city council? I don't know.
Is something being held up if this plan's not approved by us today? Kind of a different way to answer your question.
I don't think it holds up the plan. I think the only point that we would go to council would be in the instance where we're requesting additional funds. And a quick example would be budget for lab services.
But you're not doing that in this plan, right? You're not asking for additional funds.
Not at this time.
And I have no objection to recommending you to sharing the plan to the council and endorsing it. Maybe that's what we're really asking for. Somebody moving that we endorse the plan.
Chair, I would be okay with that, subject to the understanding that we would get a quarterly report on the success or not success, reevaluation, updates to the plan.
You can do that.
Fair say aye. Aye. Commissioner Mozelle?
Yes, aye.
Moving to the next item on the agenda. Agenda item 3 is consideration of a resolution number R 2303, amending the city's fee schedule to adopt fees for the issuance of carrying a concealed weapon permit. You say that Sergeant Wu will make a presentation to us.
Yes.
Sergeant Wu.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commission members. I'm Sergeant Wu with the San Bernardino Police. I'm here to discuss today with you the staff report in regards to the consideration of Resolution R 2303, which is to amend the city's fee schedule to adopt fees for the issuance of carry permits. Historically, police departments have been allowed to issue CCW permits under certain circumstances. San Bernardino historically has not issued very many CCW permits in past years. However, due to the change with the the Supreme Court of the United States in their New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin decision, which determined that the proper cause government was considered unconstitutional for the Second Amendment. So that was a big primary goal for someone to get over so they could get a CCW permit. Now that that has gone away, there's quite a bit of people applying for CCW permits. The sheriff's department themselves have stopped accepting anyone that's out of their jurisdiction come August 1st, 2022. A lot of the permits, if cities didn't issue one, they went to the county. However, the county is now inundated, right? A few of those, and they've stopped taking CCW permits from everyone else. So they say, hey, you need to go to your local agency to apply there. However, because we have not issued many in the past, there's a considerable fees that come with it. That's why we're asking to adopt the resolution, which is going to change this these schedules to add in these additional costs. So the police department, we're asking the city council to allow us to change the fee schedule for CCW issuance. Going through the fees itself, we're going to start with the application fee, which is $25 to start the process. Next, we're going to have to do someone's background check, which usually goes through the live scan process. So initially, we're going to ask them to for a $93 fee, which is the live scan, and then plus a $20 San Marino roll fee. That's just a fee for an operator who does all the fingerprinting and the time and all that stuff to take care of that, which ends up being about $113. If in 2 years does a renewal, that'll be $72. The cost goes down after the initial. The next part is the psychological exam. By law, we're only allowed to charge up to $150. However, the law also states that we have to use the psychological service that we use to hire police officers. So there's going to be a big amount of difference there from $150 to what we get charged from the city, which is $450. That is the fee that we're probably not going to be able to cover, even with our change in the fee, right? Because that's the big gap in there. So what we're doing is now it's $150 plus the fee for having one of our detectives is going to do the investigation. They're going to conduct an interview. They're going to go through the person's packet, make sure it's done correctly before it's provided to the chief. Chief of police will then, at the time, determine if the person is allowed to have a permit or not. Right, and so then the total cost for that is going to be $516.42. Right, we're going to charge 20% upfront, is $103.28, and then when chief gives approval for the permit, we'll charge the last 80%, $413.14. The reason behind that is so that if the applicant does not pass any portion of process, they will not lose a lot of the money up front. So they don't be out 20% versus. So the fiscal impact for the city is we will have to are going forward to budget for the $300 cost over what we're charging the applicant for fees for the psychological test. And based upon that, the staff recommends that the city council adopt the resolution R2303 amending the city's fee schedule to include fees, issuance of CCWs. For personal staff recommendation, appropriate motion would be, I move to adopt resolution R2303, a resolution of the San Marino City Council amending the city's fee schedule to include fees from the issuance of. Are any questions? That's all I have.
Questions?
Regarding the if the license requires testing. So I see the city is requiring that. So it's going to be the same. Is it the psychologist or the psychiatrist to police officer applicants?
Yes. It'll be the same stuff that we use.
Okay.
And there's no difference for an officer or a CCW applicant. They're the same week in that.
Okay, but is it a panel of psychologists first?
It's one psychologist.
Okay.
It's, yeah, one that the police officers use for frequently.
I see.
No, Chair. Mr.
I don't have any questions. I'm looking at the penal code sections that are cited and not passing any legal judgment here, but it looks like they got it right, so.
They're going to go off of their the paperwork they provide, their driver's licenses. There's going to be a utility bill that has to be in their name, and take that as documentation they actually do.
The psychological exam, because it's operating at a loss, can we do a similar PD multi on that? Is there, that's you guys kind of help set it up, or?
Well, unfortunately, like I said, because it's capped at that 150, add any more, so yeah, it's legislated that way.
No, thank you. And then along the same lines, because it's operating loss, can we do instead of the 2080, can we do 80/20 in terms of ask for 80% of first and pick it up? It is what it is.
We could, however, I've been to a lot of other agencies. Most agencies that have done this, they've gotten a lot with this. The fact that if someone fails out, they don't put all that money forward in advance of getting the permit. So they're able to just go with that. All the agencies.
Are residents forced to apply to, if they live in San Marino, they have to live in San Marino now, is that correct?
Yes, they can't get it from anybody else.
My recommendation is to change that a little bit since it is operating at a loss. Just make up for whatever it's 50/50, but just.
I'm uncomfortable with the 20. First of all, we're going to have spent more than we're going to recover by the time that we make the decision to deny. That we're going to spend all of the fee plus the additional $300. I don't think that the citizens of the city should underwrite the process for the handful of people who are applying for these applications. It's a shame we can't charge the full cost. I certainly don't see any reason that we should not charge at least 80%, if not 100%, regardless. I realize that the resolution's been prepared. But I will not support it. 20 fee arrangement.
Would you like, sir, would you like the 50/50 or would you like the 80/20? Both.
I would look at, if you express any recommendations. As long as well, I mean, I would. It's just, that's the only reason I can't say I. Well, I think it's.
Do you know other than us, other cities, has been discussed the committee split?
We did the staff report with the city attorney, and he agreed with us to go with the 2080.
If we have to be 2080, or he agrees?
He agreed with the recommendation.
Agreed that that would be acceptable, but he didn't say it had to be.
Sergeant, now that we've heard what of the interest of the Public Safety Commission, we can go back to the attorney, our city attorney, and see if we can.
Can we recommend the resolution for adoption subject to an increase in the fee, the upfront portion of the fee, subject to approval by the city attorney? I'd be comfortable with that.
I mean, honestly, I didn't go deep dive. That's the section. One zero. Filing fee, B1, license authority.
It sounds like it's a step.
Well, it's a different.
Elected as a step.
Right.
Reasonable or logical.
Right, well, B2 says the first 20% of this additional local premium collected on filing of the application, the balance of the fee shall be collected only upon issuance of the license.
That's where the central.
Yes, I don't, I just.
Maybe just ask if we can somehow weigh it heavily so the cities.
We'll verify that portion.
Yeah, I think no, they'll always.
Before you make a motion, we do have a request to speak in the public. Mr. Dustin?
I realize you're just voting on whether to recommend the fee schedule, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments on information I think would be helpful for the city council to have when they get this. So I understand that historically, when LA County Sheriff Department was handling the bulk of these requests, that information, data on that information was available to the public through the district attorney's office. And I'm just curious to know whether, or I think that the city council should know, especially with the discrepancy between what we can charge and what it's going to cost us. They should know how many of these permits get requested. I think residents should be able to know that. How many requests are there? How many renewal requests are there each year? And I know right now the Department of Justice has a little bit of a data security issue, so they're not making that data available, but I just wanted to know, will that data be made available to the Department of Justice in the future if the city takes over the bulk of these? And then secondly, when I read the LA County Sheriff Department site, my take on that, and Officer Wu, it seemed like they were saying they would not take new requests from residents who live in an incorporated city within the county if they can make the application to their local police department. But they would consider renewal requests from people who already have permits through the sheriff department. So I'm just curious, is that going to cause a problem for the city to sort of keep track of how many of these requests are there, who's processing them, who's handling them? That kind of thing. So anyway, that's just, I think, information that would be helpful for the council to know and for residents to know. If for nothing else, how many of these are we going to be processing at a loss for each one of them? Thank you.
Better, would it be appropriate to include in the statistics that the department works on a monthly basis, number of applications, number of approvals, without information as to who the individuals are, but just data?
I'm not sure that you'd want it monthly. I think you might want to either spread that out to annually or biannually, because we might get groups of them all at once. A lot of people apply at the first of the year, and then if you were to get that monthly, you might see zero for like 6 months. So I think it might be an annual report, like what the gentleman was mentioning, is that how many requests are you receiving annually, and then how do you track that? And Sergeant Wu and myself have talked about that, and basically there's going to be a spreadsheet because you have to budget for it because of this significant difference. So we would need to request budgeting if we're going to continue forward in this fashion. The only other way would be fully change our psychological examination process by having a fully different examiner.
Are you then contemplating delaying issuing permits until you can receive a modification in your budget?
No, I don't think we can. We're actually already receiving them. They're only on hold right now. Sergeant Wu has a list of them. He can probably tell you approximately just a rough idea of how many we've received thus far. But we're not delaying the process unnecessarily.
I don't think we need that. It's just a question of financial support. Are you planning to go to the city council and request a change?
Potentially the mid-year review, felt we needed additional funds, but right now, not knowing that number, exactly how many we'll have, it's kind of hard to ask for the funding.
So, and I have New York State Rifle Pistol Association, United States Supreme Court. The opinion is written very clearly and unambiguously that constitutional right should not be unduly burdened, and that's why the good cause requirement was struck down as unconstitutional. In California state law.
Commissioners, I've got several complaints. They can't hear you. Need to speak into the microphone. Residents on Zoom can't.
Okay. So, Penal Code Section 26190 states that it gives the discretion to the licensing authority to require a psychological examination. Penal Code doesn't require it. So I know the DOJ processes them. Here, the DOJ gives discretion. My perspective, since we're talking fiscal, given the Supreme Court's clear and unambiguous directive, that this is a constitutional right, shall not be appropriately abridged, and that state law gives the licensing authority the discretion to require psychological examination. Given that it's not state law requiring, and if the state law required a psychological examination, there's a constitutional challenge to a requirement to undergo psychological testing for CCW license permit, then Attorney General would be the one defending that lawsuit. But since state law gives the discretion to the licensing authority to require it, that is, City of San Marino does not have to require a psychological examination. Now, again, drug testing, you can do your criminal, your fingerprint, I can convict of a felony, and you ask for bed 5150 welfare institutions hold, placed under conservatorship. Have you ever, there's been an adjudication that you're mentally incompetent, but because state law doesn't require San Marino to require psychological examination, San Marino is choosing to pursue that route. If there's a constitutional challenge, the City of San Marino would be defending that lawsuit. So just if we're concerned about money, it seems that the crux of the, we're upside down in this thing is because we're requiring a psychological examination. I just throw that out there. That if there's a resident who is not pleased with having the exercise of constitutional right, as articulated by the U.S. Supreme Court, like it or not, right? If someone is not pleased with the city burdening the exercise of a constitutional right with requiring a psychological examination, a constitutional lawsuit, which is how the Supreme Court begin. There was a regulation that was challenged. So my concern is with fee schedule and the requirement of that. From pure fee schedule, I can't assent to a fee that's discretionary that could result in the city being sued for a constitutional violation. So I approved the rest, and I know the law is we can't charge more than 150, and we're not proposing to charge more than 150. But since the psychological examination is a discretionary fee, as opposed to fingerprints. I would, you're gonna vote no on it because I can't in good conscience vote to approve something that could subject the city to liability for litigation. The Supreme Court obviously is taking some academic cases, or I would approve. So I just wanted to say that for the record. Again,
Chief Incontro, I think, wants to comment on that specific issue.
and I know it's not our call to make. I know the city council already made that decision for it.
Good afternoon, Commission. I just wanted to reply to Commissioner Pfeffer's comment regarding the psychological testing. We do have the discretion to do so. We believe that it's important to be able to have that discretion. Merely checking someone's criminal record if they have one, maybe, or interviewing neighbors or doing something like that may not help us completely understand the moral, or rather the person's background. One of the things that we're doing within the California Police Chiefs Association is trying to maintain a consistent way of doing these interviews and granting these permits. The Attorney General failed to provide guidance. The legislature hasn't provided guidance either. There's a great probability that everyone may be liable to some sort of litigation because of the way this was formed. We want to be consistent within Los Angeles County. We're trying to be consistent. One of the things that Sergeant Wu did was look at numerous numbers of departments, and we tried to pattern our policy that was consistent with other agencies in Los Angeles County and elsewhere in the state. What I would recommend, based upon Commissioner Pfeffer's comments, is that we once again go to the city attorney and discuss that with them, and we can move forward. One of the problems we do have is that if we continue to delay this, we are subject to litigation. We're given a specific amount of time to initiate the process. And we're trying to get this done to avoid any other litigation or claims for litigation, and trying to be consistent with what we can do with this policy based upon the Supreme Court's ruling. Thank you.
Time we have left. I know this has been topic, I think, 3 or so meetings.
I can't hear you, Commissioner.
Sorry. In terms of the timing, I know we've talked about this topic for probably the last 3 to 4 months as we've been working on this policy or procedure. How much more time do we have left before you have to start issuing these CCWs? Because I do remember you said that people had requested them.
Sergeant Wu should have the information specifically about the length of time that we have to respond.
Well, there hasn't, most of the agencies that I spoke to, they've already pushed it forward. They've gone with their procedures, stuck with 2080 and that type of stuff. So we haven't gone, we haven't finished the process in regards to that. However, I don't recall any specific date. However, like I said, people are expecting it to have been done within a couple of months after the decision was made, and the agencies are falling behind. A lot of agencies are not up to where we're at as well. Agencies are actually issuing permits as well. Larger agencies, they've already started issuing them, like the Sheriff's Department. They don't have a psychological test because they want to push more of these. So there really isn't a drop dead time that you have to have these permits rolling. But sooner is better because some people may become impatient. Issue a permit.
Chief, a question. If we were to recommend adoption of this policy or this resolution tonight, and the council were to adopt it, would you then, would you be in a situation where you'd be immediately issuing permits? In other words, you're ready to go now, all you need is the fee structure? Is that where you are?
Chief, did you hear the question?
No, I can't hear anybody. It's difficult.
I was just Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Are you currently at a point where you're ready to issue permits and the only thing that's holding you up is a fee structure?
Well, actually, what's holding us up is trying to get this approved and moving forward. We included the fee schedule in there based upon our research and based upon the advice of the city attorney. You've raised an issue that you want us to explore. I would recommend that we don't approve it at this time and that we meet with the city attorney, answer your questions, and then move forward. That would be my recommendation.
And would someone restate the question, please? The question was to adopt the resolution, or pardon me, to recommend the resolution for adoption to the city council at this point.
Thank you. With the condition, just following up with the city attorney to make sure there's not a possibility of changing the upfront initial costs from the Plan 20.
We recommend a resolution for adoption of city council, subject to a review of the fee structure by the, subject to the possibility of increasing the upfront portion of the fee structure, subject to review by the city attorney.
What about the psychological tests? Include that?
We can address that question at the same time. We'll be talking to the city attorney so we can address
Okay.
that.
Like to remember
Include-
states that have constitutional.
Two questions then for the attorney.
Right, I think there does need to be a fee schedule. We're kind of this conundrum of, if we don't pass a fee schedule, we don't allow the issuance of CCWs in town, that would give rise to issues, obviously. So there does need to be a fee schedule in place.
Right.
And it's ultimately up to the city council as to what that looks like.
Right, can we vote on the motion to recommend the resolution for adoption to the city council, subject to a review of the upfront portion of the fee by the city attorney?
And the completion of a psychological exam.
I think it needs to. I think
Jennifer, have you been able to write something down that approximates that?
I've got recommend adoption by the city council, subject to a review of the upfront portion of the fee, subject to review by the city attorney and completion of a psychological exam.
the position of the requirement.
Right. By the city attorney, she can stick those words ahead.
I'll move the city attorney to the end.
Right.
Right. Oops. All right, let's vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozelli, if you vote yes.
Yeah.
Vote moving to item 4, Police Department Monthly Report. Better, Monday.
This report is compiled in order to inform the Public Safety Commission with essential information regarding the department's activity for the month of December. As previously stated, towards the end of the year, we did have an uptick in some of the residential burglaries and some of the crimes occurring at the end of the year. Many of these cases are currently in the process of being investigated by our Detective Bureau. I'm happy to say that in many of the cases, there's actually some sort of leads that we're currently working, whether it be evidence collected, DNA, video evidence, and other type of evidence like that. That's being processed, and hopefully in the very near future, we'll be able to come forward with identification of suspect. But what we found is most of these are occurring during the late evening hours or early morning hours. As noted in the report, you'll notice that in one case, they even found that a resident's ladder was located resting against the home. Point being there is that we don't want the residents to be leaving items that can be used as a method of entry into the home, whether that be a rock, a tool, a ladder, etc. So we encourage everyone to secure those properly, put them away when not in use. I know it's difficult, especially if you have construction going on, but just keep it in mind. You'll notice in the report too that this is a common, this method of entry is actually a common method of entering through second story windows for some of these crews. And that's why we really want to make a difference in that regard. They know that sometimes second story windows may or may not be alarmed. So therefore they know that they can get in undetected, especially if the house is uninhabited or someone's gone for a period of time. Our cameras, LPR cameras continue to assist our detectives in their investigations in a variety of different ways, whether it's the suspect vehicle and or vehicles that we're trailing. Sometimes they travel in packs. We found that those have been very, very supportive in our investigations. As previously mentioned, for community engagement, we do have a meeting come up at the end of the week on Thursday, as mentioned. That is on the 19th at 6 p.m. That's the community safety meeting. Our goal at the meeting is to keep the public informed and let them know what we're doing and where we're at with our different investigations. There's also something I wanted to point out as far as in these burglaries that we had running through 2022, what we found is that rear window entries and or doors, 24 of the 58 or roughly 41% were made through that method of entry. There was also side door and windows where it accounted for approximately 10%, and second stories accounted for roughly 15% of the method of entry or the point of entry. One of the things that I'd like to point out that again we'll bring up at the meeting on the community engagement meeting for community safety is the need for surveillance cameras and alarms, and we'll keep saying that because it doesn't just help the resident, it helps us because if this crime does in fact occur and there was no way to stop it, at least we can have a method of tracking down the people that committed the crime and making a difference. Fortunately, what we're finding right now is homes with active cameras only account for roughly, again, this is with the data that we collected during the investigation. Cameras only accounted for like 35% of the cases. There was homes with no cameras were roughly 52%. So more than half of our residents don't have cameras. And then 10% of those roughly don't have cameras that are working. So they have cameras up, but the cameras are not operational for one reason or another. Alarms are somewhat similar in that roughly 33% or a third of the houses had alarms that were actually activated. The other 22% had alarms that were not activated. So they had an alarm, but it was not activated. They felt it was safe to leave the home for 5 or 10 minutes, 30 minutes. They would all think that that's okay, but we all know that they're watching, they're driving the neighborhood. So if you have it, use it. That's why you have it. That's why you pay the service. That's why you bought it in the first place. And I will tell you that we're finding that of the cases that we took, 40% of them had no alarm. So case in point is that we still need people to got to have the residents do their part and get those in place so that we can help everybody out. Because that's our goal, is to take care of that. Next, personnel wise, that's what you also brought up, Commissioner. Personnel is doing pretty good right now. We actually have one person on training, and we're total sworn right now is at 29. Unfortunately, and then at the end of this week, we will lose one person that's actually applied for an outside agency. They have a hire date and they put in their time and their, as far as their resignation letter, they will be moving on at the end of this week, which will take us back down to 28. And that's a lot of the reason why, with attrition and everything else, that's why we requested and talked about bumping our numbers up, because we can never stay ahead of the curve. There's always something going on for one reason or another. Technology wise, we have that Faro laser system, which is going to assist us with a variety of different things, whether it's fire department, public works, police department. It's for investigating crime scenes, for crash scenes. We've relied on other agencies for that. for all the critical incidents that we've had with a crash, we've had to call an outside agency. There's also the use of drones, which we're looking at the future of drones. So the laser we should have within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'll talk to the vendor. It's already on order and we should have that soon. The goal is to get some key people like Officer Abington that's on the motor to that training. Therefore, he can start using that since we did it. And with that, since Officer Abington's been out in the field, one of the biggest differences or impacts we've seen is, aside from his education, has been enforcement. If you notice that for the month of December, there's 152 citations issued. Like it or not, he's out there to do a job, and if you come across him, he's very cordial in his behavior, and he's just doing his job. So he's doing the education and the enforcement. That concludes my report. Public Safety Commission concurs with staff's recommendation. Appropriate action would be to make a motion to accept and file this report.
Turn on their alarms. Total report, safety and traffic collisions. So we had 123 traffic collisions. San Marino 2022, which is way less than the year before.
Correct. And actually showing a 2% decrease, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and then pedestrian, when it says pedestrian free, there are only 3. What is it? What is it?
That's a traffic collision with a pedestrian that was involved. So for
Okay, so
the
pedestrian versus auto, or bike.
correct. Bicycle is below it, it's separated. So it'd be a pedestrian or that they were struck by the car in some fashion or another. But they're separated those. There's a pedestrian and there's a bicycle.
Okay, so pedestrian means pedestrian hit by a car.
Right. Right.
So only 3 pedestrian accidents in the entire town of San Marino, the entire 2022. Well, I just want to make sure I'm reading this right, because we had a very lengthy discussion.
Yes.
So there were literally 3 pedestrian versus auto accidents in the entire town of San Marino in 2022. Is that what this means?
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bozell, questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chang?
Yeah, Officer Evington, he's done a great job. I actually saw him give out 2 tickets right near the front of my house.
You weren't one of them, right? You weren't one of them.
No, I wasn't. Within like 5 minutes, I was leaving my driveway, pulled someone else over, and it happened also to be the 30 sections study. So, yeah.
Martinson?
Officer Abington Dawson, you see the numbers. When is the second motor officer going to be deployed? I know we were waiting for anything to training.
Yeah, we're looking to have him back, if I'm not mistaken, in the next 2 months. So this month, he should be getting back on the bike and keeping himself acquainted with the bike as well as patrol, because he's working patrol. But he should be to training within the next couple of months. I believe that was the next date we had. I don't know if he'll be back on the street that soon, because the class itself is a couple of weeks. But I would like to think somewhere between March and April.
Last time I asked the question, Chief alluded to it. Can I really find on cameras for their streets?
They can. The prices, we have to get the prices for them because Flock has changed that, but from year to year, especially as they grow. So they were at one point 2,500 per camera. They got to, I believe, around 3,000 per camera per year. Also, they are required to keep it for 2 years. They sign 2-year contracts. So the answer to your question is yes, they can. We just need to have them, the way that they would do it is we would get all the pricing, try to educate them. We've done a Zoom before with some residents that were interested. We actually did have a donation. We had someone that donated money and that went in through donations, and they said basically earmarked it specifically for the purpose of Flock cameras. However, with that donation, they said, we don't care where you use them, just use them. So for residents that want them on their street specifically, they would have to make that request. they could donate the money, and then we would specifically allocate it to their street for how many ever cameras they want for a period of time.
It's video surveillance. I mean, we're not all these signs on them that says, this city's under video surveillance type of thing. I mean, I know we're kind of all these tools, but we have a post, we have technology, but figure out what it is.
Some cities will actually put that at the entrance, especially one started with associations. That's the way they kind of started out, was with the homeowners associations. So you might put it as you enter into an area. However, you don't want to mark the cameras themselves. Obviously, they're inconspicuous. You can see where they're at, but we don't want all criminals and everyone else knowing exactly where they're at. So we wouldn't want to attach a sign to it and call attention to it. But point is well taken as far as maybe putting it at different entry points to the city, much like the neighborhood watch signs where we say you're being watched type of thing. So we could definitely look at that.
I've heard things that back in the day when the alarm goes off, it would first go through the emergency contacts as a false alarm or not. And I also heard we were at the dual deploy, send the officers and see the false alarm in parallel. What are we operating at today?
So we want, what we want is the alarm company to basically call us immediately. However, it's the discretion of the homeowner how they have it set up. Generally speaking, what they'll do is they'll tell the alarm company that once it comes through, we want you to notify us to verify it's not a false alarm. We told them to stay away from that. We just want to be called and we want to come out, and we're not charging. Because the sooner we get there, obviously, the better. Whether it's they just walked away from the house or they're still in the house, we want to be deployed. So the current status, as far as we're concerned, is we want the call to come, the notification come from the house to the alarm company and straight to us. They can call the E-Party or any emergency contact, the homeowner, whoever they want after that, but we just want to be notified. If they call us off halfway there, we don't care. And that happens all the time, where we'll cancel the response. However, we don't want them to waste their valuable minutes, because some of these literally occur in and out within 5 minutes. And typically that is the response delay. So if it goes in, call the resident tells them, yeah, I just left. There shouldn't be anybody there. We just lost 5 to 7 minutes. That's kind of it's priceless. So we don't want to lose that time.
I have one last question. Other than flock cameras, have we thought about other types of cameras?
We have in the past, I don't know if you remember, several years back, we approved some pole cameras, but they're not monitored and there's storage issues. So by government code, you're required to, and by city regulations, you're required to collect this stuff and maintain it for a period of time. You can only imagine that the storage becomes very challenging with those types. Plus, they're not monitored. What I mean by that is you would have to have like a dispatcher or a employee of the department constantly watching the CCTV to determine what's going on. We just don't have that ability. Most agencies don't. So they've gone to something that's automated like this, where it triggers and tells you if there's a vehicle that's wanted, if it's I've got warrants attached to it, that kind of thing. So we've looked at it in the past. It's just that with current technology, this is probably the best way. Constantly with the flock cameras, our local jurisdictions are signing up like from month to month, basically, and adding cameras. So, but as something comes up, if there's any recommendations for us to look at something more, we're open to it. It's just that we've gotten down that before, and the issue is storage and monitoring.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment or ask questions? Not to have a motion to receive and file the police department monthly. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Chief. Would you make the present monthly report?
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, Vice Chair, thank you. I know before you have the report from the fire department. Report running on time. We had several significant incidents during the this last month.
One of them being a 3-vehicle traffic collision at on San Gabriel Boulevard. We had 2 patients that were transported by San Gabriel RA 51 and RA 105 from Arcadia. They came in to assist. For the week of January 4th through the 9th, due to the rain that we had, the fire department staffed an additional utility vehicle with pumps, hose, parts, hand tools, and extra equipment with anticipation of the rain. We also had public works staff up as well. The team effort between fire department and public works. We pumped a lot of basements, assisted a lot of residents with flooding in their yards, even into their house. Additionally, all frontline apparatus were staffed with our swift water rescue gear. Fortunately, we didn't have to deploy any of that. During the storms, engine the RA responded again to multiple floods, basements down, trees. We even had electrical fire within the city. Another significant event, myself being on both of them, I responded to a rescue with a large tree down in the city of Pasadena with people trapped, just because the area was inundated with calls. The other incident that we had was a Metrolink rail hit a downed tree on the Metro line, South Pasadena. So we had to evacuate the train and put all the passengers onto another train. So that was something we don't get every day. The other big call that we'll be taking the council for recognition. On January 10th, RA 91 was dispatched to a mutual aid response with LA County Fire Department in the county area of San Gabriel. Upon arriving, they received the call. Unfortunately, they couldn't, the address didn't come out at the accurate location. So LA County sheriffs canvassed the neighborhood, and with dispatch, with the help, they were able to get a cell phone signal and find out where the patient was. The patient was in the back of the house, which appeared to have had a fire with smoke coming out of an open bathroom window. The patient was able to say that she was back in the bathroom and couldn't get out. Our RA personnel, this was dispatched as a shortness of breath, so they didn't have their proper PPE on. They didn't have their turnout gear, their breathing apparatus. Without hesitation, made a determination to get low, go in, find the patient, remove the patient, and she received 55% of burns over her whole body. Somehow there was an explosion in the bathroom. It's being investigated by LA County investigators, and she was transported to an area hospital within 10 minutes of patient contact. That was a significant event, and we'll be recognizing that crew in the near future. Also, at our last council meeting, council recognized fire and police personnel of a cardiac arrest we had at the high school back in the beginning of December, where within this patient with full cardiac arrest, a defibrillator was placed on him. Bystanders assisted, defibrillated the patient. PD and fire arrived and assisted, and within 30 minutes, we had them at the hospital, and he was conscious and breathing, going into full cardiac arrest. Training, we continue to focus on our 3 probationary firefighters. They're all doing very well, and we continue with that. We just finished a conditional offer of employment to fill our last vacancy with the fire department. We're hoping he starts by the end of the month, and at that point, we'll be fully staffed. Very good for us, and that completes my report. Questions?
No. Hearing none. I'd like to have a motion to receive and file the fire department. Favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Do it again. I'd like to ask if there was anyone in the audience.
So in an effort to better the time, I'm going to give a much more abbreviated report than I planned. Obviously, the first item on here in the report deals with the itinerary. A lot of order.
Thank you for making.
And you're welcome. And then so to that end, I obviously did not have the benefit of being here when this report was originally commissioned. But in fairness, I can't speak to what was directed or not directed to do. It does appear there is a disparity between that, between what maybe the city and residents are looking for and what problems and solutions were actually presented. And so I do look forward to working with the traffic task force and with the commission to bring this report some resolution that's acceptable, and whether that's just evaluating what's good from the report and being able to move forward with some other recommendations. I do echo and share some others that weren't even expressed this evening. So I do look forward to working with all of you and our residents with this issue forward and move on from here and actually start implementing some changes that we all agree and benefit the community. So that being said, I dwell on that much longer. The rest of the items in the report, you will see deal with a lot of the projects that we have in the works. There is a lot of deferred capital improvement projects that haven't been addressed in the city. And so for a few weeks that I've been here, I've been working with all of our consultants and understanding what the progress is, how we can move those forward and begin that work underway. So you'll notice in the report, there's a number of meetings that we're moving, and we'll be providing an update in the near future on what projects will be completed this fiscal year, what would recently be accomplished, what may roll over, but our list working on. So that covers those issues, and the rest are just some household items maintenance at the end of the report. So I will conclude with that, but I'm happy to answer any questions about anything in or not in this report.
Any questions?
I'm sorry. One of our neighbors was over Lacey Park and was saying there's a large dog group coming up, many days of the week, and they said 6 to maybe a dozen dogs not on leashes. Just having kids and knowing they have kids, is that something you're aware of? Is that known? What's the background there?
So that is something I've become aware of since I've been here, and I haven't been too involved with it. Obviously, it isn't something we condone. Our policy is all dogs need to be on the leash. We've been involved with that.
Yeah, what we would want is we'd ask anybody that sees it happening to call a police department, because we'd have the Humane Society respond for the violation. Of course, we would go out and observe and do whatever we need to do. However, we would want those calls to come into us when it's happening, because I think what's happened recently is we've found out or been notified well after the fact. For example, they would say, well, last weekend we had all these dogs out there off leash, and we're like, well, kind of hard to deal with that. No, they're not there anymore. They're not there anymore. So I would encourage all the residents just to give us a call. I mean, no call too small, right? Just, if it's a problem for the residents, then, we don't want somebody getting bit. We don't want a kid getting bit or other dogs and so on. So just give us a call. We'll work on it.
Pass along. And just other minor question on the old bathrooms at Lacey Park. There's that green construction sign and still up around it. Is there any plan just to make it a little bit more sightly and look at more like storage as opposed to kind of half built? Yeah, that's all I have.
We have a motion to receive and file this report. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Comment.
Item 7 is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes, or? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That brings me to an item having to do with next month's meeting. Our regularly scheduled meeting would fall on the third Monday in February, which happens to be a scheduled holiday called President's Day. We need to reschedule the meeting. Staff was going to give us some information. Did that happen? If not, I'm going to ask if.
I think it should be. Chief and Contra actually worked with our city clerk on picking a day. I just don't know what that is. I have to look at previous emails. Do you know offhand, Chief?
Yes, Christina Baker recommended the last or the third Monday. However, I believe talking to Chief Donaville that there had been a discussion last month's meeting to cancel the meeting for February. However, the other date is available, and that date
I think it's January 27th. February
yes,
27th.
February 27th.
Commissioners, is there a preference regarding moving to the 27th or canceling the meeting? I think the traffic task force could very easily have an update for us. Whether or not want to hold a public hearing at that point in time on the subject, or whether we just want to take input from the commission. I mean, obviously, we would be meeting in open session, so the public would be welcome to attend. But I think if we put off next touching of this subject for 2 months, it might not be the best idea.
The flip side of that is, you go to the city's website, we already this for Mondays in the month. We had quite a bit of turnout from the community. Suspect in case of future meetings. So my concern is if we have it on off week when not to meet when there's not a public input. I know it's going to be posted and whatnot, but people may have a calendar. Plus, it would give the I would be, unless there's something that is press of time that we need to consider this time out. My preference is to cancel it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I would just want us to be a robot for any ongoing efforts right now, so if I can get sure that I.
Let's go ahead and cancel the meeting. However, if you will permit, allow the traffic task force maybe widen their viewpoint and look beyond the itinerary report, other materials, with the goal of having a broader report when we meet in March. We need a motion to cancel the meeting. No. Right. Are there any requests for items to be included in the future agenda?
There's an open house Saturday, station 9:30. This is Saturday the 21st. 9 to 11:30.
The inventory and the effort to support vacant houses. We have had at various times in the past discussions of issue vacant houses. We adopted an attempt to inventory them. Less perfect. Is there-
Just don't know if that's in the purview of the safety commission right now. It may not be a priority initiative for the city. I know we have our community development that oversees that, our current vacant home registration ordinance. And that's going to be brought to council to ask the question if they would like staff to pursue something more aggressive. That.
I'm just thinking of it from the standpoint of public safety rather than from the standpoint of anything else. Just many times in this commission, in terms of the implications of vacant houses and their effect on both. This,
Sure, I think given the 2-month time frame, I think we will have an answer from council. And we can certainly ask our community development director to share his path forward. He's proposed.
just an update, even if it's just that someone else is doing something. Thank you. Anyone have anything else before we adjourn? Thank you to everyone for your patience this evening. Thank you to the public who joined us, including those who remain.
Council liaison.
Declare the meeting adjourned.